And then every day, Dplus just wakes up. You know what? I don't think spring split matters. It's like, well, you certainly showed us that, homie. So. Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight with me here, MonteCristo next to me, and Ox Casts in the other box. And we're going to talk about the LCK and maybe a little bit about the LPL. We'll see. Nowadays, it's quite hard to get people to talk about the LPL. Not out of disinterest. In fact, the people most interested in the LPL won't talk to us about the LPL. I don't know why this is. I don't know if it's like actually the LPL's become some sort of cult and me and Monty are just like heathens on the outside, and then there's like an inner circle, and then within that there's like the actual real secret order, which takes all the like stuff from Satan and stuff, and then like it puts it out into the world and then gets all the money. Oh, well, I'm thinking of the entertainment industry. My bad. Right, I got off track on that one. So anyway, the thing is, Monty, normally, you know, famously this show, the reason it's the best is the rapport, the freestyle jokes, the live running commentary and analysis, right? But what people don't know is we very rarely prepare anything for this show. But actually, Monty, in light of our fabulous association with a certain company, I've actually prepared something for you, Monty. So
oh boy, what?
If you go quiet down a second, I'd just like to say, suffer long hot smoke, I say verily nay. I was cool off the freeze pipe, eh? 300 degrees, can't get much cooler than these. A twister across the landscape of my imagination. That'll be the tornado bong with its percolation. Twin turbines make it comfy if you like to get high. No need for ice cubes, so the glass will be dry. How do you purchase thefreezepipe.com? Oh, and use the code LFN for 10% off the order. Now, if you haven't studied beyond just the cursory 2 or 3 times that everyone has, James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, you might actually have been a bit lost in some of that there. You probably didn't really sort of sense the deeper meaning of what I was saying. It might even have been confusing, perhaps even disorientating, kind of like the experience I have when I get hot, irritating smoke in my lungs while I'm trying to enjoy fine cannabis products. We've all been there. I don't know if anyone's been there. I can only speak for myself. Much like James Joyce in his work, it's very recursive about his own personality and individual sort of single-pointed experience of the universe, but fractally taken down through the prism of an individual human soul. So anyway, if you want to have these sorts of thoughts, but really chilled out, I'm talking, not just chill, I'm talking really chilled out, like over 300 degrees, then what you'll be talking about is the glycerin, food safe glycerin chamber, which when you put it into the freezer section for only 1 hour, an hour can become an infinity, I'm telling you right now. But it won't feel like it with the freeze pipe because it'll feel like only an hour, like just like those pauses in the LEC. So then you'll be right back to the action and you'll be able to cool in that smoke by over 300 degrees, almost like the amount of degrees that the LPL does in terms of meta evolution, where they just end up right back at the beginning again, no matter what seems to happen at Worlds. They just do whatever they want, don't they? I'm here already, which is also kind of the experience of being in a James Joyce novel, isn't it? And how do you get this, Monty? Well, you get it from the freezepipe.com with 10% off your order if you want to slash away at your fantastical dragons using the code LFN.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I did not expect that today, I have to say.
Well, all I'm going to say is this. Here's the hidden component to understanding all of that. The product helped me write that particular verse.
Excellent. Unlocking your inner muse.
Exactly. You know, I thought I'd give people a show of what can happen if you indeed do cool your weed smoke by over 300 degrees.
Wonderful.
With the freeze pipe.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to Summoning Insight, Ox. Who knows what's going to happen on this show? I never know.
Who knows? There you go, mate.
So Ox has just moved to Korea. Very excitingly, after being stuck in visa limbo for forever.
Yeah, I think so. The visa we applied for towards like later end of December. It was quite late that things sort of happened in the off season, and then it was 11 weeks before I actually got to fly out there. So I missed pretty much the entire split. I got in for week 9, and then I was also like obviously trying to sort the apartment as I arrived while also casting on week. So it's just been kind of hectic. But I'm kind of at the point where, you know, I have somewhere to live, right? And there's a little bit of time off for playoffs, so it's worked out okay.
You arrived just in time to take a break. Congratulations.
Yeah, perfect. It's actually going to be like playoffs, and then it's like, okay, I have a couple of months to do nothing. Great.
Well, I'm sure you'll be quite busy setting everything up. So I trust that you've been in your time that you've been waiting to arrive in Korea, you've been watching all the games. You did some LPL as well, so we can talk about that with some of the playoff games coming up, especially because this week is the start of the giant LPL bracket. Obviously, you did LPL last year. What made you make the leap over to LCK?
I mean, there was a
Did
few
you see
things.
3 out of 4 teams in the in the
That's
top 4?
exactly it. You know,
at
I was
Worlds?
like
Yeah,
LPL till I die, and then
understand.
we got smashed, and I'm like, I'm with that. I think there's a lot of reasons when anyone sort of makes this decision. Ultimately, like one of the biggest parts is the fact that LPL is still remote, whereas I'm now at Lol Park casting in person. That alone is like enough justification. But also, as much as I love the LPL teams, like the LCK broadcast is something I've watched since I got interested in League, and has always been something that one day I hope that I'd be able to work on. And the fact it's happened is still kind of crazy. But so there's a lot of reasons behind it. But I'd honestly say the remote one is the big thing. I think it's just the fact that I've gone from doing bedroom casts to now being at LOL Park with the players there. With my co-caster with me. It's just you can't compare that.
For what? Just being in a bedroom,
Being in a bedroom,
in Australia or whatever, being like the LPL, welcome to China, the LPL.
Well,
look at your bedroom
here's a
behind
question
you.
for you. Do you think the LPL will ever go back to on-site casting? Because it just seems so much more economical for them to do it remotely out of Europe at this point in time. Like, I'd be surprised if they did, personally.
Without commenting on what I know from having worked there, in my personal opinion, I feel like it would make more sense to have a remote studio, because I think
That's true.
doing remote isn't necessarily bad if there's like the studio setup. I think the reason it's frustrating is because there's a lot of technical issues with doing like everyone in their own bedroom. There's also problems when like people are not in the same room with each other. It's hard to have the same like level of rapport on a cast. And also, if when I was casting with like Hysterics in Australia, there's a bit more of a delay between. So there's obviously some issues with it's not always the easiest to get like visas in China. So I think that if they went for a remote studio, it'd make things a lot easier, and also bring the level of the broadcast up. So that's what I'd hope.
How much was the delay when you would do it? Would it be just like a second or something?
Yeah, it wasn't super long, but then also sometimes there were a lot of issues behind the scenes. Like I think a lot of people they see stuff happen and they're like, oh, what are the casters doing, right? But like sometimes we'd have issues with the connection from China. So like we'd be casting off a feed, and the quality would just drop to the point where like it was unwatchable. Like you couldn't tell what was going on. It'd be like, okay, which square is which champion? And there was times where like you just kind of muddle through it, but sometimes it's like you literally see it on the broadcast like, I don't know what's going on. The feed's absolutely gone. We've had issues with like audio as well. It's just it's a constant headache, and like to be fair, they're trying to do everything they can. Like when we complain about the feed, they offered solutions and try to like sort out a more reliable strategy, but it's just like it's never going to be the same as like having like being, for example, the LCK being in the studio, having like the direct broadcast feed, and you never have to deal with any of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that, and especially they could set up something in Europe or Australia, both of which have proper time zones that are acceptable. At least, like obviously North America is in the middle of the night, but at least for you, the LPL games start in the morning in Europe, or they start at basically the same time. Like I think what most Australian times is like an hour ahead of China Central Time or something like that. China Standard Time rather. So I think it makes sense in order to do that. But yeah, glad you're with the LCK now. So I guess we should start talking about some of these teams. Do you want to start by talking about T1 versus KT, or do you
mean the LPL? What, that was the LPL final, Monty? Didn't you see it? Like the end was even just exactly like the LPL finals. Like anyone could fucking win. Roll that. Oh no, sorry, you don't win this time. My bad, KT.
I feel like there was such a shell shock, because I mean obviously the expectation was T1 was so dominant, everyone was just thinking T1, who's going to challenge them? Will it be like Gen.G? But KT came out huge, but also I feel like T1 looked really sloppy, and I feel like that meta read was super off as well. Like it's like at the start of the split, I feel like they were completely on top of the meta. We saw KIA defining it with like these marksman support picks, but then we've seen like a shift away. Like it used to be like junglers would just gank bot level 2, you play through bot, mid's kind of a bit more disconnected. We've kind of shifted more to like mids being involved more, like more focus on getting the mid control and then leading there. And then also it's been more about skirmishes, and like we've seen like the return of supports like Rakan and stuff, right? But it just feels like, especially there was like game where they went like Zeri, Ashe, Kassadin. And I'm like, I mean, even in the marksman meta, like, I don't know how that's supposed to work, but it just seemed like a free loss. And then there was other games where I'm like, well, I still don't like their draft, but they kind of won because, like, there was at least in game where owner just popped off. It was kind of weird. And then game 5, I mean, I feel like you can't really analyze that. It was just chaotic. Yeah, a lot going on. I do think that KT has obviously stepped up, and I think the meta has started to suit them more because I feel like as we've sort of progressed, BDD was already. I feel like one of his characteristics early on in the split was he was quite active on like making roams happen, and it's something that kind of fits well when he's able to play things like Talia in the current meta. I also feel like certain members, like I feel like Keen absolutely popped off. Like Zeus, they for the All Pro for LCK, I think Zeus was the only person to have like 100. I think it was 100% of votes were for him for the first team. And yet Keen, like there was that final game where it was like the Narn to Jace, and he just absolutely bodied him, which was kind of like, you know, very uncharacteristic of Zeus generally. But then also he's like, I feel like his performance in like the World's Finals was not great either. So, and also MSI Finals last year, it feels like maybe sometimes the pressure can hit him harder, even though like normally he's such a solid, consistent player.
I mean, I do think that one of the things that T1 suffered from in this series was that they were very insistent on blind picking for Zeus, which like led to these scenarios. And if we think back to the last time that they played KT, they actually were banning the Jacks and making sure that that wasn't going to be an opportunity. Like they were very deliberate about targeting Karma and Sejuani and Jax, and that was because KT was rather one-dimensional at times. Before we saw all the pick comps, before we saw the Vi and the Twisted Fate and everything else coming in. So they knew that KT had some very specific win conditions, but this time around they walked into this series and really, you know, it felt like they were very actively going after the Gnar, and even in the 5th game when the Jace was available, they opted into blind picking the Gnar instead of the Jace. Although they did actually finally ban the Jax that was causing them so many problems, but this led to a pretty advantageous lane matchup for Keen, where he was able to get, you know, solo kills. And I think he also was just, you know, to your point about Zeus not showing up in the World Finals, even though Zeus was like arguably disadvantaged, he still did not play particularly well, even from that disadvantaged state. And there were a lot of times where, you know, Keen was getting these solo kills, but we could argue whether that was necessary to have happened, like whether there was a way that Zeus could have lost those lanes a little bit more gracefully rather than dying repeatedly and giving KT an option back into the game.
I also think it's a really weird thing where, because I feel like talking about the last World Finals and last MSI Finals, where it feels like they just don't give as much help out to Zeus in the draft and kind of just expect him to deal with it. Because obviously you mentioned in this series against KT, but like in World Finals, we saw that the Aatrox being left open to the other side consistently when Aatrox was super broken. And as well, I remember specifically when they went up against RNG, every game Bin was getting Gwen, which was so broken at the time, and then RNG would ban it against Zeus. And it just feels like sometimes, you know, they're like, oh, you know, Zeus is great. He can manage. He can handle it. Like, I don't know where the communications come out from, whether it's Zeus being like, I can handle it, it's fine, or it's the team being like, yeah, just deal with it. But it definitely feels like there's a lot more freedom given over to the opposing top, especially when we've seen when in the regular season drafts were more focused around Zeus and they gave him like counter pick. Like he can just completely run away with the game. Like we saw, I mean, not even counter pick. We saw times where like they were first picking the Kennen and he was just dominating. They just couldn't match him as long as he was set up in a situation where they didn't have a good counter pick for it. So I feel like it's just weird to me. I feel like it's weird that they give him at times, especially these high pressure moments, so low priority in setting him up for a good lane matchup when he's shown he can dominate.
Here's the thing though, at least in those international finals though, there was actually like a form reason to do it. Like if people don't forget, Bin was actually terrible before that final in MSI. He was like actually mega underwhelming. Obviously everyone thought King was an actual meme. I still think he is, but somehow he managed to like for that one day just fucking be possessed by the fucking spirit of League of Legends or something and win the game inexplicably on champions he doesn't even play. And but this one though makes no sense at all, because as you say, like even though everyone gave the vote to Zeus, like Kane had a very good split too, mate. He's one of the reasons why really this KT team was so dangerous. Like that's the thing about this squad. It's funny, Monty, that in the end all that speculation we had about like, but which would you pick out of like KT and Dplus? That didn't even matter. But the joke is, Hanwha just like somehow still put the shit up T1 and they still picked KT anyway. There wasn't even Dplus available. They still picked them. But that's why though, Monty, I said, Even though I understand that thinking of like, oh, but they're supposed to be the weaker team. Like, this is why you don't want to play against KT in these playoffs, though. They're really dangerous for anyone. What I love is that they
I
almost
was
are like an
shocked they
LPL team,
picked
do. They just
KT.
go for it. They just go fucking ham this team. They can also wreck themselves, of course, but it is amazing to watch. It makes great games.
I was really surprised that they picked KT, just given that Keen was, the way that we had just seen T1 kind of dismantle Dplus and the way they were playing the last week of competition was that they were, I mean, it's the same shit we've seen. It's like pick Elise, go dive, stack a few waves, go dive bot lane with Faker and an Elise and get kills onto Gumayushi and let Zeus kind of play Gnar in an isolated lane matchup. And he'll do really well on his own and arguably win. But that's a lot harder to do when you're playing Keen because there was a clear cut between, it was like Zeus, Keen, giant gap, everybody else. And also Keen plays weird picks. I think he's 9-1 on Jax so far this split. So you just can't give him that, which they knew before. They knew halfway through the second round robin when the last time they played that Jax was illegal for Keen to have. But he also does things like play Gangplank and other weird picks. And it was also a little bit strange to me because even though the Jace bans were very prevalent, the Jace fell very far through the draft in Game 5. And as you mentioned, Ox, the Kennen just went away, which it's the same patch that we saw in the last week of competition for LCK, where Kennen was like rising to like first pick blue side priority. And this is a Kennen that was buffed pretty significantly on 13.5 and then also benefited from the Cosmic Drive buffs. And he looked good. I mean, it looked like a very powerful champion.
Yeah, I feel like it must be like scrim data or something, or like some teams have worked out counters or it just hasn't been performing. But it seemed like this was like the pick of the patch, and the fact that they were willing to blind it like on blue side, and then it just kind of faded away. And the Jace as well, that was a weird one that I saw like in I think it was the GenG Honwa series as well. Like so Gen.G was setting up for a Zeri pick because they banned Caitlyn, Lucian, and Varus. And then we were expecting Honwa, like, okay, well, of course you're going to ban Zeri here, right? Because they'll just B1 it. And then they didn't. They banned Jace. And we were like, okay, well, that's just grief. And they lost. And then game 2, they didn't ban Jace, and no one picked Jace. And it's just like, it's so weird. It's like, Jace is his pick where sometimes it's like, we have to first rotation ban this. And then sometimes it's like, okay, well, it hasn't been banned, but no one cares. And it's such a weird one because you'd expect, like, second rotation is completely different because, like, you've seen what the draft is. You might think, oh, this draft is really rough if they have the Jace, or, if they pick a Jace here, it could be a problem because they can flex it. Like, if they pick on red 4, they could flex it between top and mid, but then it just slips through the gaps sometimes. Like, I feel like some of the drafts in playoffs in general have been, like, really hard to rationalize because, obviously, like, every time, like, a draft goes through, even if you don't agree with it, you got to think, okay, what are the teams thinking here? Like, clearly there's some thought process, but sometimes I'm like, I just don't see it.
I think maybe with the Jace, because the one time we saw it picked in that KT versus T1 series, it was picked in R5. And when KT was blue side, they banned it first in the first rotation of bans. And then when T1 was blue side, they banned it in the second rotation of bans. So it seems like teams really will only want to save this for R5 from just what we're seeing from the blue side, red side drafts. And at least T1 was confident that it wasn't going to be picked in the first 3 picks, particularly because they were pinching the jungle pool. And I think that forced like jungle and bot lane to be picked pretty much first in the draft. But I'm honestly wondering if, because we've seen the rise of engaged supports and Rakan in particular, if teams are more reluctant to play Jace because there's a lot more backline access now with some of the champions that are being played. I mean, we got to see that in Game 5, what happens when you have the Jace if you're not careful about having Gragas on your flank and paying attention to it, because Faker's flanks and 100-0ing Jace actually got them back in the game. And yes, part of that was Keen positioning very badly, but part of that was T1 realizing a win condition and setting up traps. And they were willing to give over the Jace in that game for the first time it wasn't banned in that series. And they seem to have an answer for it. So I am curious if increased flanking and increased backline access is actually one of the reasons why Jace isn't being played as much.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I think maybe it's kind of like a remnant of when the meta was like more heavily around like the Varus Ashe bot lane, where you are just able to sit back and play pro. Because especially, I mean, T1's draft in that game where you have like Rakan, Gragas, Wukong. It's like it's so easy for the Rakan just to land. Like he eased to someone RW, and I also like I remember when like Rakan first came out. That was like back when I was a player. Like Gragas Rakan was so broken because like the Rakan would knock up, and then the Gragas just casts over the top, and it's like you're just dead. Like there's like so little counterplay. So I guess that makes sense, and I mean obviously worked pretty well to get them back into the game.
Yeah, I
And
think
also,
there's also potentially some truth because Keen had been playing Malphite in the previous series that maybe I mean I'm actually surprised that KT if Keen because he had a very good performance on Malphite if they were willing to if they were showing Malphite versus Live Sandbox why not just leave it up and see what happens versus Zeus would be my question. I'm a bit surprised KT didn't at least try that matchup once.
yeah, I mean maybe part of it was there was a lot of like Xayah priority from T1 later in the series, so maybe like because I feel like Malphite, like if you're gonna pick it, you obviously don't want to be playing it necessarily into Xayah because
Sure.
you can just ult away
Yeah.
from it. So maybe that's why they end up bringing it out. I was wondering what your thoughts are because we obviously saw like blue side winning like all the time in playoffs and being picked pretty heavy priority. I do think like generally speaking, blue side is stronger, but I also feel like teams aren't doing a fantastic job of like using red side because obviously on red side you can pick like support on 3, you get top lane counter pick, but it just feels like a lot of teams are just like handshaking, especially bot duos, where like one team will pick like Lucianami, Zeri Lulu, Zyra Khan, and they'll just go, okay, we'll just we'll handshake a duo that's just gonna farm up in return. And I think there's a lot more like opportunities where you could punish potentially or like pick a more favorable matchup, but it feels like teams just aren't. Like there's definitely been games where I feel like one team on blue side have kind of like picked. I mean, this happened more in the regular season, but like they pick a composition where it's like, okay, we have like an anti-dive comp, and then the other team just picks like a short-range dive composition into them, and like especially, I think there was one game where it was like Xayah Veigar, and they were like early rotated, and the other team picked like a full melee composition, and I'm just like, okay, I mean, have fun, but it's so weird to me.
I mean, just from the blue, like the blue pick ones that we've seen, so many of them. So what teams have been doing is that if you're like Dplus, you're prioritizing the Lucian because that's been one of your main win conditions, this year. If you're T1, oftentimes you've been like, for example, in the first game of the T1 versus KT series, you're taking Elise because that empowers your entire kind of win more bot play style. And I think what was, we got to see that. I mean, that game 1 was a stomp, and it was when they had Lucian, Nami, and Elise all at one time. That was, I think, very clearly a mistake that KT made. Like, I would never give T1 all of those champions together in the first rotation of a draft. And KT's bans were, I mean, what were their bans? There was Annie and Varus and Caitlyn, which is also, we can talk about Caitlyn because Caitlyn was another champion that kind of fell through this draft after the first game. The Caitlyn was no longer banned and T1 didn't pick it. She did receive minor nerfs, but I really don't think they did anything. Yeah, I think that teams are either picking an AD carry first or a jungler first most of the time. And that's because they want to power up a specific matchup. I think it makes sense. Like, if you are Gen.G versus Hanwha, picking Zeri first makes a lot of sense because Peyz has been both lane dominant and game dominant on Zeri. And that's one of, I think, Hanwha's only win conditions if it is a Viper like pops off on Zeri. So that made sense to be in that series. And I also think that I do wonder, as to your point about blue side priority, because having the red side last counter pick for mid and top, which is basically exclusively what it's used for these days, does seem extremely valuable, especially if you can just pick kind of a stable bot lane and go even.
Yeah, I think it's just like I don't know if it's like teams not being confident to make use out of it, or it's just like that there aren't picks in the meta that they wanted to utilize. Because I still like if I was a team in this meta, I would still pick blue side. It just feels like when teams are on red side, it's almost like they're not doing much. It's kind of like they're accepting, okay, we're on red side, this one's a loss, we'll go next, we'll give it a try, but we'll go next game. Like I just feel like sometimes the drafts end up going in that direction when they could be doing more. I mean, speaking of the DK Honra series, I found that one like
Let's go
I
on that in a
get
second. Wait. Listen, I appreciate that you nerds actually do watch a best of 5 like that and think, and then go, wow, wasn't it a great game? Yeah, what the fuck was going on R3? I mean, I thought, with being on the other side. Then you what? Right? You all acted like it was a great chess match, right? That game 5 was absolute nonsense. What the fuck was that game? All you need to know is this, right? That game 5 was so ridiculous. It produced one of the greatest LS thumbnails you'll ever see. If you're on YouTube now, pull up LS's account 3 days ago. The video for his commentary when he cuts it down, like the highlighted version. By the way, it's quite cool. He does it like those NFL ones where they shorten it. Like you get a whole series in like 50 minutes, right? On this one, it's the next level game 5. So he does the whole game 5. And it just says, right, here's the thumbnail. The thumbnail just says insane series, telecom war. So already you're like, oh, okay. But because it's LCK, when you go insane series, you expect to the kill thing will be like 11-7. Like, oh my God, the macro. But no, it has the kill feed at the top. It just says 33 to 27 kills. So you already know, like, what the is this the LPL? Right? And then it just has LS going at this, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is the LCK. I've said it, LCK is nothing like this for like 7 years. And then on the other side, right, Faker, perfect like PR shot by T1 with like some anime pose, like perfect circular glasses, making him look like some like weird anime villain / protagonist / antagonist / genius character who just does whatever he wants with plot armor, going, shh. LS, it's the LCK. It's so insane, mate. It looked like even that alone, I want to click it. And I already saw the game. Like that game was on one hand one of the most entertaining but most nonsense games I've ever seen in the LCK, Monty. Like even if T1 wins now, the problem is all that shit we were talking in the split. Like they're one of the most dominant teams of all time. Like that was so whack, that series ending though. They could have lost that for reals. I mean, they also could have won about twice as well.
I mean, they should have lost.
They should actually, yeah.
That was the early game was a complete fucking disaster for T1. Yeah. Like falling that far behind against the composition that KT was running should have been basically a death sentence. And I think we learned a lot about both KT and T1 in that series. Like T1 was really trying to overforce plays to get back into that game. The hilarious thing was it eventually worked out of pure desperation. It did work. And I guess I respect that about T1 a lot, which is like, are we 5K gold behind? Well, yes, we should do a 21-minute Baron. And force that play.
It's like the MLXG meme from the LPL where it's like, when he's 5K gold behind, he feels like they're at a disadvantage, so he has to make plays. When the gold stays even, he feels like he has to make plays to get themselves an advantage. And when he's at an advantage, he has to make plays because they're at an advantage. So yeah.
I mean, it was great. And I think like what we saw from KT was a lack of experience playing poke comps, because one thing that's true about KT is they haven't been playing a lot of poke comps, and I've talked a lot about this with the strengths of T1. T1 is very good at reading enemy team win conditions. Very good. And they will set traps and map states that cause enemy teams to make mistakes with their own compositions, and doing that Baron and forcing the all-in with Faker sitting on that flank to target Keen, to mark Keen and get him out of that fight because he's where most of the gold was at that point in time, was really fucking smart. It was great. And I think both Faker and KIA, KIA's backline access on that recon that game was also fucking nutty. Like he was doing a whole lot of work in CCing the backline. But they knew exactly what KT had to do to win that game and to push out their advantage. Now, did KT also play badly? They absolutely fucking did.
By the way, that moment, Monty, when like aiming was just walking up the middle and like a little Heidi in the fucking Swiss Alps, like off to milk the cows, and then they just zoomed in on him to assassinate him like instantly, like that. Mate, that's why KT can't win series, mate. Because the problem is aiming can absolutely win you the whole thing, but he also just do stuff like that every now and then. I don't even know what that is.
I mean, there were a lot of problems that obviously caused this scenario to occur, and they had every opportunity to win. They also just got mega baited by like going back to try and save their inhibitor at that last Baron. Like, why are you sending 2 people back to your base? Both teams have 2 teleports up. If they try and teleport in the game, you can just teleport and leave. KT, the most important thing for you is to get that Baron. It is not to save your inhibitor from some minions. You can actually just get the Baron or poke them off the Baron, and then it doesn't matter if you lose their inhibitor. They have an inhibitor that's gone too. Like if you have a poke composition that needs to get position and deal damage up front, you cannot send 2 people back and then think you're going to TP in and win a fight because you haven't done the damage in advance that you need to do with that team comp. Like,
Dude,
it's not played properly.
Between this and the fucking G2 Fnatic game, like, teams need, no joke, to do like theory sessions on endgame, things like this. Like, what's the basic principle at play here? Because teams are just doing this is like solo queue play. Like, and we're not going to go into the LEC much, but like in that game there, that was just like the Fnatic players taking turns to just one man hero, like expecting the fucking neck. It's like, guys, all you have to do is just team fight. You just won the whole game. So it's the same thing, Monty. Like, I hate it, especially when you have a team not even doing one plan. Like, you're doing both plans, but so they don't work, like you say. Like, do one or the other.
Like, KT has been playing 5, front to back 5 versus 5 team fighting comps, or they've been playing pick comps with Twisted Fate and these types of champions. And so, like, I just think that they were not prepared for the win conditions. And like, you can ask, okay, well, why did they pick the Jace last? I mean, it was evident the Jace was very strong for them in the early game. They got huge edges off of it. Yes. But when you are, I mean, they all end really badly at that first Baron too, where the thing is they lost their heads. It wasn't even key to stop T1 from doing Baron. The key was, okay, we're gonna slow roll this into the pit. If they get Baron, we'll just kill them all in the pit. Who the fuck cares? Like, you literally could just trap them in there with Jason Talia. Like, to BDD's wall where he jumps into the back of the Baron pit and just ints it's just terrible. They freaked out because they saw this Baron being taken, but it was nerves. I mean, Dom made this point on Power Spike where it's like, if they're not playing T1, they probably don't play like shit. I think they were actually just like freaked out because they were almost about to beat T1 and they had this huge edge in the 5th game of a series.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like it definitely, like, nerves are a big thing. I also feel like a lot of people expect T1 to kind of be unwavering, but there were, I mean, obviously, I've talked a bit about Zeus, but like Gumayusi had some moments. Like, there was one point where.
Oh, you mean the all LCK first team pro Gumayusi, best ADC in the entire LCK? Continue. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, just glad you got that out.
Just want to get that out there. Yeah, no, nothing.
It was like a moment when like they were pushing up and they were gonna end, and then like he gets Nautilus ulted as Xayah, and like you see the Nautilus ult coming, and he just doesn't Xayah ult and just like immediately dies. And like it's the one where I think Aiming gets like a quadra kill to finish it off, and he's like the only person left. And I remember I saw it and I watched it back. I was like, well, I thought his ult was up, and it was up, and he just like tanked the Naut ult. Like,
dude, what's wild about that is usually the Xayah's fucking way too trigger happy on the ult just to get out of it, killing. You know, they use it like a flash. Like, get the fuck out! Like, that is ridiculous, isn't it? Just do nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I especially because like you were close range to threats. I think like after the ult hit, like Varus queued, and then Jace also jumped on her, but she'd already died to the Varus queue. But it was like definitely just like nerves, or I don't know, because I feel like no way you just sit there and think, oh, I can tank this. It's like it was a weird game, I think is the way you can definitely summarize it. And I think obviously in those moments, especially like you were talking about like the theory and like the late game, I feel like part of the problem is like you're inherently always going to practice early game more because like a lot of games will end after the early game, and a lot of teams like T1 are like super practicing it. But also like, I mean, I know in EU scrim culture, it's like one team would get ahead and at like 50 minutes you go, okay, I mean, not even 50 minutes, like 10 minutes. It's like one team's like 4-0 and it's like, okay, game's over, go next scrim, you know, you just move on to the next one. And I feel like part of the problem is like a lot of teams don't end up like practicing the full game or how to close out a lead. So they become very good at getting leads, but then when it comes to these moments where it's like, okay, we have a poke comp that's super far ahead, we have to close out against a team with a ton of engage options, they can kind of like not be as practiced at that, and we start to see some of the cracks.
Imagine if like teams could have, what would you even, like sort of like a second team? Fuck shit, what that, sort of like if you analogized it, it'd be like a sister team. You know, it could be in the same org core. What you do though, you wouldn't want people to think it was just one team. You'd maybe call them like different names. Like one could be like T1, the other one could be like T2. Shit, I'm getting lost here anyway. So if you had
letters,
just,
you know,
hypothetically,
like A or S, you know?
Exactly, yeah. Basically, in, you know, before LCK, there wasn't any before LCK. There's always just been LCK. We've always been in LCK. But if hypothetically there was a before LCK, maybe call it OGN or something, fuck, who knows, get crazy. So, right, anyway, they could even have good casters on it. You know, nowadays they sort of go for the budget options, but, you know, times are hard. So, we call that austerity measures. But anyway, so basically, when you to do that, then you could actually set this up and practice against them in exactly whatever kind of scenarios you wanted. But the problem is, some people called Checks Notes Riot Games, they decided no. So Oh well. That ends that segment. So back to the game. Yes, shout a lot, can't we?
I do think though that one thing that hasn't really been discussed in this series is that the way T1 played that draft was very good, and I think that in an even game state, KT would have really struggled to win that game. Not only because of the fact that they don't know how to play poke compositions, it would appear, but because we saw how well Faker and Keria played those flanks and the backline access. And frankly, the Rakan made it look quite easy, to the point that we were talking about earlier about maybe why Jace has been deprioritized to a certain degree. Now, why Kennen has been deprioritized, that one is a little bit more mysterious to me, I have to say. I'll have to think more about why that might be. But
I've just always thought, mate, so that's another champion that so few pros actually are good at, like in the team context in the modern day. You know what I mean? Like they can do like the lane, but like the amount of times people just mess up all that at the ult as well, never use it properly or never group properly.
Sure.
It's criminal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually insane, like the big moment, like the one against G2 when it was a Smeb, like one shot all of them. Like
6 worlds.
I swear this champion does so much damage in late
it's mega,
game.
isn't it?
If you find like a single good flank, it's just over.
Yes. Hence why it doesn't ever feature in the LCS and never will. There isn't even a champion called Kennen. What are you talking about?
LCS meta is very amusing.
Wow,
it honestly, like, just as a sidebar, watching these LCS playoffs and then watching some of these games, these playoff matches in Korea is just, it's such a giant.
Dude, what I love is this. Even though that's more ridiculous because obviously LCS is even worse. My favorite one is this. You know, I've revealed on this show, if people know the deep lore, famously, right? Monty, because he is someone who comes from like a theatre background, he understands improv, and he also is an amiable guy. He has a laugh he does where he doesn't really think it's that funny, but he just thinks it deserves a comedy laugh / a reaction. You make a good vibe, you make the show better, right? Basically, it's why I'm a bit of a twat when I just don't laugh at other people's jokes. I go, whatever, just didn't really feel it, mate. It's whatever. I'm just a bit of a scorer's mentality, you know. I'm not a pass first type of guy. So when Monty does that, I've always said though, you know Monty's real laugh, because if I ever properly get him, he has one where he goes, it's just obvious, it's so different as well, it's got nuance to it. Basically, you can tell how good the LEC casters are. I didn't know how good Cadril actually is, Monty, until I watched part of the highlight for this on his stream, right? Because when you watch him do the LEC, he gets really passionate, doesn't he? Excited, he's into the games. But I'll tell you what, when he doesn't have the cameras on and he's doing his own live view of a game like that, the authentic, like he is actually in the game, mate. He's not even commentating. He's so excited. He's drawn into its emotions. And all I'm going to say is, like, he's really fucking good on the LEC. The way he puts on that face, you know, the way he pumps that fake enthusiasm up. Go on, it's the best we got, right, guys? There isn't an LCK. Let's go for it. Because, mate, you see it. Because bringing it back, though, I think Dom's actually finally nailed it, Monty. You know, everyone thinks Dom's just a hater. Well, you know what? Within his hatred, he has crafted, I actually think, an epiphany about the LCS. And when he said it, I think he's right, dude. He's actually right. If you've seen enough of those LCS playoffs, we used to just blame it on stuff like, they just don't know how to play against Bjergsen and Zillion, or like, what the hell, why are they picking like this one champion over and over again? It's not even, like, for example, last year where like they didn't just play any of the strong ADCs, people were just playing like busted down like fucking Caitlyn and Seraphine or whatever, right? Dom's theory is, people don't know how to actually punish comps in the LCS. So that's why you actually are probably just at your best, just playing whatever suits you, whether it's meta or not, whether it's a niche pick. Just if it's a champion you're good on, this is the thing. If their natural champion and comp counters yours, they'll win. But they won't like do things like we're talking about now, and you guys broke down for 20 minutes. Like, right, well, you're playing against a port comp, so you've got to understand when he can be caught. No one's thinking about that. Like, the team with the port comp wouldn't be thinking that in the LCS. The team playing it wouldn't be thinking that. What they'd be thinking, Monty, is like, I have Darius. I hope to get solo kills on Darius this game. And then they're like, and if you get a lot of solo kills, you could join us on Darius, and we could all fight them 5v5 at the Baron. It's like, it can't be 10 years of this. Like, bro, if we're talking about, here's the joke, right? We should bring it back, Orcs, and be like, they almost need like somewhere to practice any moment of the map of the game in the LCS. So, you know, from like minute 1 through to even minute 10, maybe have a dragon every now. What's going on? Are they all just fucking with crayons just eating their own shit? Oh, hello. It's the madhouse, Monty. I've got to see some evolution of the meta in like 10 years. 10 years.
I think that's what's amazing about LCS is that it just, you know, at least with Europe,
mate, it's like that Matthew McConaughey thing. And dude, I feel like Matthew McConaughey and fucking Dazed and Confused. Like, you know, Monty, life's crazy, man. The older I get, the LCS just stays the same age, man. Same age. All right. Like, what the fuck is this? 10 years. I'm in a fucking purgatory. It's Groundhog's Day. And I think my little thing. Oh, time for the LCS again. Is Bjergsen playing? Oh, shit, he's on Zillion every game. Fuck. Oh, man, is this hell? Please, get me out. I'm sorry I said all that stuff about TSM and Riot.
Well, the chrono shift is really just the symbol of the LCS. It's like they die only to be resurrected again in infinity, right? They're just they're Prometheus getting their liver eaten by the eagle every day.
Okay, that's the dark law of the LCS. And then every day, Dplus just wakes up. You know what? I don't think Spring Split matters. It's like, well, you certainly showed us that, homie. So.
No, but even Europe has been punctuated by some really high highs and like genuinely very exciting teams.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to the beginning with Moscow 5 and like CLG EU, and then. Obviously, we've seen teams like Fnatic and G2 make world championships and win MSI and do all these wonderful things internationally. And for NA, there's just never been any hope that's not fake hope. That's it.
There was that one bit of hope. You remember when they beat IG at MSI and they had like a day's worth of hope, and then they got beaten in the fastest festive
true. Exactly.
Time. I think that honestly makes it worse because it built them up so much. So like, oh, we're finally a good region, right? Yeah. We finally have some respect, and then just gone in a second.
No, that's how you know, by the way, that they definitely did some dark magic. Like that was like some shit where you like sell your soul in exchange for winning the game. Because afterwards, right, you're like, oh, amazing! I can't believe I won the game. And it's like you hear like a sound in the distance, like. What's that sound? It's like, time to pay the piper, your soul. Like, it's torn apart by. That was ridiculous. Like the way that was the fastest one of all time as well. You know what I'll never understand about that? I'll just explain a small concept that I told a load of pros back in the day in Counter-Strike, and none of them ever listened to me, which is this. If you're ever watching a Counter-Strike frag movie and someone's doing an amazing clip and 4 people run in and they just get their heads domed in, why does the 5th guy still run in? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've always said, if I'm the 5th guy, my number one, like, I can't win the round anymore. So my number one goal is you're not getting me in your movie. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be killed by your teammate at mid, like, the rotator. So I've always thought in that scenario, like, why did they just let themselves get wrecked like that? Come on, man. Like, if you're losing the record game, I'd even look it up after game 2. Like, look, I know it's fucked up, coach, but what is the record? We're getting stuffed right now. Oh, it's like 50 minutes. You know what, guys, right? Pick scaling comp, like, which can sit in the lanes, like, all under the tower. Like, still at least
just destroy minions.
Exactly. Just delay the game, for fuck's sake. At least don't beat the record, because here's the problem. And that was the MSI final. No one's ever going to be able to beat that record in an international final, are they? Like, you could maybe do it like a quarters or something. In an international final, no one's ever going to lose like that. The problem is this, right? It's so rare and is being in finals. You get to one and just, got to break a record somewhere. Like, that's the worst record to ever have. They'll never be beaten.
The thing is, they could never bring it up. They could never bring it up because it's like, oh, we beat IG. Yeah, but then, like every time you bring up that MSI, they've got to just forget about it. They can't mention it. Otherwise,
that's what kills me as well, dude, because the other thing is, like, that was obviously, like, on paper, what an amazing accomplishment. It's like the reigning world champion, the LPL champion. But the problem is, right, everyone who wants to make the case, like, wow, give TL their credit. It's like, that rumor that IG was, like, having internal issues and fighting and all shit. There's loads of rumors out, but I will say there are also those rumors about every Chinese team ever eliminated early at Worlds, MSI. It's also part of it. So I could believe some of it sounds like an excuse. The problem is when you then watch them turn around and lose like that, you're like, maybe there was something to those rumors. Actually, even you start like gaslighting yourself. Like, did it even happen though? Did they really ever beat them? Fucking hell. It's so outrageous, isn't it? I can't even believe that. Not least because, you know what no other bothers mentioning? That would have been an amazing final, being as G2 bizarrely just never beat LPL teams. I want to see that final. Can we go back and just watch that final, please? There's something I would change in history. I'd just like to see the final, dude, like IG against G2 in a proper best of 5. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, I feel like we missed out. We were denied. That's the lasting legacy of NA, just denying us enjoyment.
Exactly. Even in giving us a series, they had to steal a better one from us. Exactly.
All right. Are we done with our NA sidebar?
Yeah.
Do you have?
By the way, Monty, I have a very quick sidebar off that though. Here is the sidebar. You know what's weird? You're all going to think, come on, this is the easiest setup of all time, right? Thorin and Monkey are going to absolutely dunk on LeTigress, right? For that weird commentary where she thought the dragon went down, but it hadn't gone down. She kept commentating and then she sort of didn't acknowledge she was wrong until they sort of told her. Here's why we're not going to do that. Because Monty actually did that himself. It just can happen in a cast. Monty famously had one where he thought, because a Baron went down, that actually Shy with like a Sunfire kit, but actually hit it with the last tick. It was just a famous one where he had a brain fart. And the problem with that, Monty, I actually thought for real, like, obviously, look, it really did sound like a bad moment on the street when she did this. And look, yes, in the modern day, people already have got all the fucking scrutiny and the magnifying glass to criticize them. But I just wanted to actually ask you that, Monty. If you're in the middle of a cast like that, remember in League of Legends, there's a million things you can talk about in a Baron fight, in an objective fight, like people flanking, what's the gold, what's the significance of the dragon. It's easy to get lost. And the thing I think people don't understand is this, Monty. You can't just go, oh, pause, rewind. I didn't make, you have to sort of like, in a way, and try and keep going and almost yes and the thing you said wrong and turn the ship and start to realize if you're. I just thought I wanted to ask you about that because I think it's a lot. There's more nuance to that than people realize. It's not as simply she's an idiot. Like I think she just got lost in something and then kept following her own narrative. If you know what I mean.
You can't know too if there's like some weird thing distracting you. Like there could
someone
always
say
be
something in your ear or something.
The producer talking to you. You don't fucking know. I will say that obviously, and Ox can talk to this as well. Live commentary, you will inevitably be wrong. That's just how it rolls. Like you're gonna fuck up because you are basically taking. Here's the analogy: you are taking an oral exam as a caster on an extremely strategically complex game in front of 100,000, 1 million people who are all capable. You know, one of them will probably, there are going to be so many people who are watching this game that know better than you about every single aspect of the game. Because somebody's going to be that fucking Kled one trick that knows more about Kled mechanics, right? And so like you are going to fuck up. Inevitably, right? It is just such a super complex game. I mean, the pro players are the same way. They fuck up all the time, right? Even the pro players, if you're not a Kled one trick, you're not going to know as much as a Kled one trick. That's why pro players go when they want to learn a new champion. They go talk to those one tricks. They all do it. They all do it. And so it's really, really difficult because not one human being is going to know anywhere close to the total amount of information at this game. So you have to kind of play to your strengths, right? And it is just inevitable. Now, here's what I will say about LeTigress is this. As a play-by-play caster, one of the theories of play-by-play is that in traditional sports, there is a ball or there is a center point of action that is self-explanatory and is easy for the audience to follow. In most esports, I would say Counter-Strike is a little bit different because there's a bomb, and so you kind of know where the bomb is at any point in time. So that is and
you have a radar, so you can see where they're going to fight or whatever.
Yeah, it's also like another reason why Counter-Strike is the best esport because it actually does a lot of the work for you. Like what Counter-Strike does is everybody knows what's going on because it's all real world weapons and that everybody knows, right? You don't have to be a video game fan to understand. It's easy to explain. The cadence of the game is in rounds, so there's time to like break it down and do replays and try to like properly narrate the action. The focal point of the action naturally winnows down over the rounds, so you always get the exciting moment at the end of the round where it's very clear where the camera should be for the most part. Obviously, like mistakes are made, but League of Legends doesn't have that. You know, MOBAs don't have that. RTS doesn't have that. Battle Royale certainly doesn't have that. And so back to the ball analogy, the purpose of a play-by-play caster is to provide the ball. And that is a very fucking hard thing to do. I've done play-by-play casting in League of Legends. I would consider myself passable, but by no means good. Well, thank you. I would say by no means good. Especially compared to the wonderful play-by-play casters that we have. But I think one of the issues with LeTigress is that she doesn't know where the ball is, metaphorically. And so it becomes very difficult to parse what is going on in team fights. And I think that is the true fundamental skill of MOBA play-by-play casters. And when we're talking about LeTigress, I think it's just deeply unfair that the broadcast has had her basically do every fucking role on the show, so she can never actually get comfortable or good or develop synergy in any one of these things. Now, my personal opinion is that she is probably weakest at casting. And like, I'm not super excited to see her cast, especially when we have people like Captain Flowers. Like, I mean, that's a hard comparison, right?
Sure.
But it just, you know, when we're talking about these playoff matches, you know, if it's a random regular season match, then fine. Like, maybe give her some reps. Like, it's not too bad. But like playoff matches, like, maybe let's not do that. I mean, it's
All I'm saying,
unfortunate.
Ox, is while you're out there, you think you're just going to cast like great Korean players. By the time you finish, I want to be able to put a coin in, press F12 like I just did with Monty, and then I want a whole 5-minute breakdown of like a concept abstractly in esports with no like ums, ahs, like you're gonna perfect diction. You're just going along. It's almost like a fucking karaoke, just following the words with the bounce about. This is fucking insane. And at the end, you just cap it, and then you go. Do you have any thoughts there, Ox? Do you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that I agree.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's something when I was earlier on in casting, I always had an issue with. Is that
You
like
must have had some LPL games where there was some crazy fight where you can't possibly see what's going on and you don't know who smited it, and you know there must be some crazy scenarios that happened to you before.
I honestly, like, I'd say something I think one of my strongest points as a caster is I'm pretty good at tracking what happens in team fights.
All right. What would you say the secret to it is then?
I'm watching a lot of team fights. I used to when
All right, then. Right. It's from that school, guys. Okay, fuck you got me on that one, Ox. You know what? I set myself up for that one. Fuck me. Go on, then. Go on.
You know, I used to compete as a player, which helped, but also like back in like 2016, 2017, when I was not even competing as a player, but whenever I woke up in the morning, I just used to watch, like, you know, those highlight channels of like LCK and LPL, and I just watched like every game, and it was just like the highlights, just like the fight. So I just watched team fight after team fight after team fight after team fight, and like it helps you sort of pick out. I mean, that wasn't like I wasn't doing this because I wanted to cast, because at that time, because I had no idea I'd being a caster. I just did it because I found it interesting, and then I think it's like, as well, like, it's a game knowledge thing, like understanding like what's the pivotal pieces. I think something that like can really help as a color caster to help out your play-by-play is like you can like highlight something, like going into the fight, you say like, okay, this is the thing you need to watch, or like watch for this person on the flank, or like this is the target they need to take down, and that can like help set them up if they are someone who's struggling a bit on like focusing on the key moments. Someone who I think is like really good at that is like Medic, I think, who's a play-by-play who has a lot of game knowledge as well, but also like when I watch team fights, obviously I'm sitting like at home watching like the LEC. He will catch things that I feel like often go unnoticed in his first watch through. Because I think what normally happens is like a play-by-play will highlight the main story of the fight, and then like colors will be able to pick out like maybe key moments, or sometimes if they don't catch it, they'll like notice in the replay. But Medic does a really good job of like picking out like, oh, there's like this small interaction, like they interrupted a dash with this ability, and he'll call it live, which is like really cool to see, because it's a super hard skill, and I feel like it's one of these things that just come with ridiculous amounts of practice.
You know what, Monty? Maybe he has already got the Korean vibe. He did just give like Faker-esque advice there as to how you improve. He was just like, practice with diligence and make consistent gradual improvements. Like, thanks, Faker. I actually do get what he means there. Like, here's the thing. When he says that, he actually didn't mean that as like frivolous advice. When he said, think about it, he did just give you literally the secret, by the way, after the joke, which was he essentially just pounded his brain with like constant stimuli of team fights, so that what happened is even his unconscious just picks out like the patterns and sort of gets a sense of where they are. It's why, by the way, I've always thought the number one mistake they make in League of Legends highlights films to this day is they don't do what someone once did. Like, I'm no joke, back in 2014. If you make a highlight clip, you've got to do that thing where each new clip, you pause the frame a second, quickly put like a circle or a square over the person who does all the kills, and then you play the clip. Because the joke is like, that's why also these scenarios are so hard to do. Even when you know what happens, it's confusing, all the stuff that goes on. I've always thought League of Legends has a big problem with visual noise anyway, you know, so I don't play. By the way, that's aside from whether you're a good caster. I just wanted to bring this topic up because I just thought people don't realize how hard it is to be a caster. Yeah. They all think they just go on and just say what's happening. It's like, it isn't that easy, guys.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's also just things that you can and can't do when you're casting, even as a color caster. So for as an example, I haven't been doing my bangers only for the last couple of weeks because I've been working on a lot of stuff with LFN on the business side, and you know, it's very hard for me to put out my streams for those of you guys who've been enjoying it when I have like, you know, I'll have like an hour and then like a call scheduled, and then like an hour and then another call scheduled. So like I can't stream, even though because my day is just so like fragmented at this point in time. I'm hoping that we will be, you know, in a better place soon to do that, because I would rather be doing that, frankly. It would be a lot less stressful. But the point is that when I do bangers only, I say, here's what, especially when we watch Gen.G games, I say, here's why you guys have you don't understand why Gen.G is good. And part of the
most
reason
Monty-esque beginning to any segment, by the way. Everyone, my audience, here's why you condescendingly just don't understand what I understand. But luckily, though, I will, like a like a kind pater,
I will
allow you to. Yes,
to
you may
plebs.
sit at my feet, and I will explain to you what you just do not know, and maybe you never can know, but we will at least attempt a semblance of knowing.
Exactly. You will get a glimpse into a single facet of my knowledge.
But then avert your eyes. Don't attempt to take any more in, or it could overwhelm your puny brain.
Exactly. You can't see if you tried to turn your mind to the full brilliance of Peanut and Chovy and the Godhead.
Yes, exactly.
You would it would be like a Lovecraftian horror where it would be far too vast for the human mind to comprehend. You would go insane.
You need to have like fucking, what is it, like Perseus, where you have the shield to look and reflect. Only look in the reflection, though. If you look directly at you, you'll just go mad from not understanding the laning genius and the ability to use Poppy in a macro sense. You think Poppy's just a jungler? No, Poppy is the jungle. You know,
Poppy's coming out of these playoffs, by the way. I'm very confident.
Definitely, that's going to be the comfort pick. That's the comfort pick, game 5, mate. I'm telling you right now.
The Poppy's coming back. It came back in the last T1 versus Gen.G series. I love the Poppy. Anyway.
By the way, as an aside, one thing I did want to ask again about LCK. I had one question.
No. There's a point to my... Hold on. There's a point.
Go on. Yeah, go on.
So when I talk about Gen.G, and just to wrap up the point about casting, is that people on my stream have asked, like, why don't the casters talk about some of Gen.G's objective setups? And I'm like...
Okay.
Well, they happened like 2 minutes ago. So I was like, I have the luxury of watching what happens at an objective and then going back in time and 2 minutes earlier, watching the teleports come in, watching the wave manipulations and the warding patterns that go in. But as a color caster, if you comment on those things at the time, they may not seem important, and they may not, in fact, be important in the long run, because you don't know what the effect of those things are going to be. So by the time Gen.G takes an uncontested Drake because of what they did earlier, it's very hard to talk about that as a caster, even if you know what happened, because you have to cite a bunch of things that people can no longer see. And so you're basically just explaining some like weird teleports to minion waves, or like, guys, remember 2.5 minutes ago when like they pruned the caster minions off this wave and then it started slow push? And it's like, it's honestly fucking boring to most people. And you're like, and that's why they got an uncontested Drake. So I'm like, honestly, like, I don't know if I would be talking about this shit in the context of the game as it's going on.
It's too nerdy.
It's only shit that you can talk about now. And like, maybe the casters didn't even notice these things because your focus is elsewhere, right? And we are very specifically, we are going back and watching it multiple times and looking for these things. So even as a color caster, the point is it can be very difficult to tell the actual story of a game.
And I'll just throw this in there as well. In line with what Monty just said as well, we're also replaying a clip over and over and over and over and watching every single they did. She's watched it live. Didn't have a chance to like do any of this stuff. We can't do some Doctor Strange level shit like, after the millionth view, she's really fucking bad at casting. Like, she was doing it live once ever. Like, her experience was just going in the present, wasn't it? It was pure instinct. By the way, the question I want to ask was this. There's a bigger meta question I have for you, which is, obviously, this would have been one of the banger finals that people predict for the main final anyway, Gen.G against T1. Maybe we'll get to see it twice even. My question is this. After that KT T1 series, do you have any concerns that actually Gen.G might be able to out macro T1?
Define concerns.
Seems like it should be on the table, right?
I mean, that makes it seem like I'm biased towards T1, when in fact I'm biased towards Gen.G.
Okay, yeah.
You have any thoughts on the matchup, Box?
Yeah, I feel like Gen.G looked. I mean, there's like we had that mistake from Peanut on the Elder, but other than that, I think they've looked really solid in the last couple of weeks, and I think KT have kind of made T1 look vulnerable. And I think there's definitely opportunity to punish that. I do think that. I think that. Sorry, I've lost track of my point. I do think that.
How can Gen.G punish T1?
Yeah, I think one
If
of
they
the
can out
things.
macro them.
Yeah, if they can outmap with, I think one of the concerns I have for Gen.G is the fact that I think Keen Zeus was like a much more comfortable matchup. I think top lane might be like a big concern. I could see T1 just being too good on an individual level across lanes, where like the macro doesn't get an opportunity to necessarily play out. I think that's something I have a concern with, even though I think that like oftentimes how Gen.G play out the later stage of the game can often be better than T1. I think T1 setup and how they play around fights is really good, and their early game setups are really effective. But I think if Gen.G can find a way to navigate like top lane, for example, then that could potentially set them up to be in a good position later on. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I think as well, like as much as the KT T1 series, I think with series like this, especially with a team like T1, sometimes you have situations where you're like, oh, T1 got exposed, right? But I think it's also like a positive for T1 because oftentimes when teams aren't really challenged, like they can end up going and not being aware of their weaknesses and sometimes having fake data on like what they think is good or what they think is effective. And I think like challenges like this, if you're a team who are good at developing from them, then can often be a positive. Because I think if KT play against T1 again, and like say that's the finals, I don't think it'll be as close as it was this time. I think T1 should come out stronger and as having learned from this. But I guess we'll see.
I mean, by the way, that's why I love having double elim in LCK. I always wanted to know what would happen when you run some of these series back. Whereas if this was the old days of the gauntlet, like that'd just be it. Like, see you, KT, you had a great chance, but that's it. Bye.
I mean, I wish we had seen Dplus instead of Hanwha Life.
That's true.
At least in the double elimination, because it just feels like KT's going to destroy them, and then we'll have the top three
The
being
joke
what they
is,
are.
Monty, this is exactly why it's a perfect moment, though. Why, if you ever went back and watched all of our coverage of Worlds, you would just think we're haters. You would just think, why are they hating on this fucking this DRX team that they're so plucky, like they're coming up with crazy counters, they're trying their best, they're overcoming deficits. Here's why: because if they hadn't have won that game 5, then what we would actually have thought was that could have been Gen.G against T1. That could have been Damwon against T1. That could have been EDG against T1. And so the worst thing we've always said this about underdog upsets. I know that it's exciting. Everyone likes novelty in the moment. It's something, I never thought that was possible. Like everyone came and think this is 3-1 or 3-0 easy. So the idea, it's even possible they could have lost. But you don't like it when it then means, like in this case with the Dplus example, when the upset happens, then Hanwha Life now has to live up to what Dplus could have done against those teams. And unfortunately, they not only didn't, but just ask my mate Viper, he's fully aware they can't. They couldn't have won those series. Bro, when you watch that Gen.G one, that was like that shit where your little brother can't reach you and you're just holding his head back, like just swinging like that underneath. And you're just doing that anytime you want. Like, he couldn't do anything. Like, Viper was just like, can I please play League of Legends? He got one chance.
In game 3, they let them have like one shot at them while they like clowned around for a minute. And then they were like, well, there was your shot, guys. Now,
they were like,
back to destroying you.
It wouldn't be sporting to just 3-0 you. You know what, Viper, you can have one game of League of Legends, right? Are you finished now? Right, close it down. Shut it down. Where's Dplus? I want them in that bracket. Exactly. And also, they could have just improved think how many weeks it'll be as we go through the lower bracket,
So I think what's interesting about Gen.G is that they play more of these split push style compositions, and they have been focusing on different champion pools. So first off, obviously, like they've been playing through Peyz a lot. I think Peyz was arguably like the MVP of that Hanwha Life series. Zeri is a very high priority pick for them because the similarities between Peyz and Ruler are pretty shocking. If you watch Ruler on JDG right now, it's the same shit. You can't let him have the Zeri because he will win the lane, even in lane matchups he shouldn't be winning, dominate, and then scale even quicker than he should. As for the other aspects of this team, like Thorin, he did play a game of Jace, but otherwise was really just blind picking K'Sante and doing well in all those matchups. And if Thorin's
pick
kind
nowadays,
opt into K'Sante or Gnar picks in the top side, then that's something I think that can work for Gen.G.
That's a good idea.
Chovy's still incredibly lane dominant and has a variety of these picks that he plays that no one else really debuts, and we got to see that again. Now, I do think Zeka is quite a bad mid Gragas player, so this is not indicative of what could possibly happen with Faker in this matchup. But again, we got to see Chovy, and he's picking a first strike LeBlanc, and LeBlanc has been one of his lane bullies that he's kind of gone back to, and whether he's running it first strike or electrocute or airy, sometimes he Q maxes just to really like abuse certain melee matchups. he's really able to keep a lot of pressure and escapability on that mid lane. So there's also the factor that Peanut and Owner don't really have a lot of jungle pool overlap, and we're seeing a lot of jungle bans at this point in time. We saw the Maokai pretty consistently banned by Hanwha Life during that series. Now, nobody else is playing Maokai ever since the nerfs, and he is playing it tank now, Peanut. So Peanut, he's threatening on Sejuani, Wukong, Maokai, and Vi, and you can't ban all of those. Meanwhile, on the side of T1, Owner, as we know, would much rather be playing probably Lee Sin or Elise.
Yep.
So it really is a very different style of play that we're going to see evolving between Gen.G and T1. Like, there's a world where the Ari Lissandra matchup becomes really interesting in a best of 5, right? Because we both know that these players like to run, Faker and Chovy like to run these champions. We've seen the depth of Chovy's champion pool. He'll play Cassante mid. One of the reasons why Cassante is such a valuable pick for Gen.G is because it's a flex pick for them. They'll run it mid.
It's mad the way he has that.
Matchups.
Like it's so I'll never understand that about Chovy, especially because he's such like a monster CS player normally. It's like, I don't know if you know this, Monty, but one of the greatest snooker players of all time, Ronnie O'Sullivan, who's actually still like a world champion now. The way he's so talented, even though I don't think he's naturally ambidextrous, he just learned also, Monty, to play snooker with his other hand, and actually in real matches does shots with his other hand and can make them like quite consistently, which is insanely rare for like a snooker player. Like Chovy has some of that where like for some reason, like, and Ronnie O'Sullivan in interviews used to describe like his other hand as like his mistress. It's like, he should stay faithful to the hand that actually like he's the best with, but every now and then he has to like veer away and have fun, and take a crazy shot. Why has Chovy always had this weird thing where he wants to play like fucking tanks and bruisers mid? What is that about? Like, bro, you're already cracked as fuck on all the actual traditional mid champions. Like, why do you need to play some weird bruiser in the mid or some melee champions? Like, what the fuck is this, bro? Just stick with your strength. Why is all geniuses got to have some weird streak in them like that, where they do some bizarre shit? But I agree though, mate. Basically what you're saying, if you're a casual fan, is one thing that will make this series great is not only stylistically that the teams play differently, but their draft and actual what their preferences are totally play to those stylistic differences. And so as a result, in the draft, actually, it's not going to be like we're fighting for the same champions. And so it's more like, which of yours do I eliminate? And you're still going to get one of your comps anyway, and I'm going to get one of my comps anyway. And essentially we're trying to decide what are just the strengths. We're not even battling for the same picks that much, probably.
Yeah, and that's what I think is going to be fascinating, especially
that should be great.
Because,
yeah,
we know that T1 loves to kind of, make these early game bot movements and like go down there, get the dive done, try and get Gumayushi and carry ahead, control early Drakes. This is, either that or play diving mid with Gragas and Lee Sin and play these aggressive matchups. I don't think that's going to be an option versus Chovy. And I think that, Peanut, he doesn't have the hands that Owner does, but he does have very good reads on game states, and he does cover lanes very well. And he does play kind of better scaling junglers, arguably. So this is a super, super interesting matchup. And, it really could have gone either way the last time these two teams played. And for whatever reason, probably, possibly because of some of the item changes, we are seeing fewer enchanters, and then also the AD carries and the support position. Now, carry is still obviously going to be extremely threatening on picks like Nautilus and Thresh. We've seen how amazing he can be on those. But if they're going to play Thresh, then they're probably going to play Aphelios or Jinx. If they, and that means like, are we going to see Doran on a Malphite in the top lane? That's another option that could come through. So I really like Gen.G right now. I think they're in extremely good form. And there's just so many ways for Chovy to be successful in the mid lane, whether that, like we said, is playing the Cassante mid. What other champions have we seen that are a little bit weird? I mean, he's even played Corki this split, right?
Yep.
He's played Aurelia. He's played Aurelia. He's played Yone fantastically well. And there's still obviously the Talia that can come through also. So it's hard to pin him down in a lot.
By the way, I have a question as a sidebar. Why is it that we're all just cool with that, where we just go? And of course, Peanut, not really a hands jungler anymore. Like, What happened? He used to be a mega mechanically skilled jungler. Is he on some like fucking shit where it's like, oh, I used to be an amazing Olaf until I took a spear to the knee. Like, what happened? Like, he's only, remember, he's not like 58 or something, guys. Like, is it like some fucking RPG and on his heads up display? He's just done so many mechanical outplays on Lee Sin. Like, the hands are at like 11%. It's like the bar is like flashing red, like regenerate hands, regenerate, but he has to just keep playing League. Why? Why is his hands just gone? I don't buy that, Monty. I think people just convince themselves of that, because I know obviously mechanics evolve and it's not like everyone can do the insect kick now and all that jazz. But like, that's one of those weird things, because you know Jankos has done the same thing. They've just decided in their head they're not the players who play those champions, and they're not even going to try to. And look, I get it that their strength is like experience and read the map, fill for people, like you say, cover. But like, you'd think they'd sort of keep it going on the side a bit, you know, just as a threat every now and then. Because the problem now is, like you're saying, you have no threat at all that Peanut will pick those champions. You're not even worried. You know, in fact, he wants to go to those two or three ones that he likes.
He does prioritize the Elise. He's 3-1 on Elise, and he actually draws quite a few Elise bans. That has been one of the signature champions of his entire career. He's played a couple games on Lee Sin. He just isn't quite as good at these champions as like Oner is, and I don't think they fit the real emphasis of Gen.G as a team either. Like, you know, Gen.G doesn't necessarily need a lot of early aggressive jungler action. Peyz and Delight have been good in lane, but it's mostly about covering for them while they like crash a wave or something like that. But for the most part, they're playing pretty back in their lane because they're playing more for scaling. Chovy can be lane dominant. You know, the advantage of Chovy is that Chovy is so good at laning in the 1v1 that it gives you room to play tank and scaling tanky junglers that maybe other mid laners might need more help from their jungler than Chovy does. Chovy can achieve excellent results doing that, and that gives, you know, Peanut the opportunity to play these really annoying late game junglers like Maokai and Sejuani that have a lot bigger effect on game state come 25 minutes than an Elise does. So it may just be part of the way the team, you know, is structured. Like, they may have realized this about their own strengths.
I mean, I will say Gen.G does look like a very well-coached team. I mean, obviously, we've already done this narrative, but just the fact that they could lose those players and then reinvent their style, they'd still be really, really good, probably still the best at macro.
Yeah. I mean, it goes to show that, Score is killing it, and Peanut and Chovy and Doran, as the veteran voices of the team, particularly Peanut, are really doing a good job of shot calling within the game. And they've really unlocked Peyz. And I think what's exciting about Peyz is that he's kind of unquestionably the best rookie in the LCK. And there's going to be a very interesting conversation after we see both LCK and LPL playoffs as to whether it is Leave or Peyz that is the best rookie in the world in 2023. They've both been doing absolutely amazingly. I think I'd probably tip it to Peyz at this point in time, but you know, EDG has been shockingly good, and a lot of that is because Leave has massively overperformed expectations.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I'm still high. My point is, I'm still high on Gen.G, and yeah, Hanwha Life was easily the worst team, but the games that Gen.G wasn't playing like silly shit, like, you know, Pantheon support with Ashe AD carry into Blitzcrank, which was just fantastically bad, when they were already up 2-0. And Korean teams do this. They'll run something experimental if they're highly confident that they're going to win. They went right back to clapping Hanwha Life in game 3 of the series. It wasn't even close. It was very, very clean. This matchup between T1 and Gen.G, I think it is possible for T1 to lose this matchup in the current meta. It's rough. Like,
here's why I need Gen.G to go to MSI, Monty. Because there's someone like, this is like a nightmare at this point in time. So I've watched Knight for all these years, and I've just seen him go to like that one whack semi of Worlds, and it was just play against JDG, not Suning rather, and just lose. It's LPL team. Then if you go back with Trophy, he's gone to all these Worlds, goes to the playoffs, just plays other Korean teams, goes home. Like, can I please just see these fucking guys play in a series? And then like, I come from Counter-Strike, I would have seen this by now. It would eventually have happened. Like, can I please just see Knight against Trophy in a best of 5? Can I have that, please? They've only both been in position, by the way, for about fucking 4 straight years. Once ever in my life, can I watch that series, please? I'm not asking too much, am I?
I mean, bummer that top esports is underperforming so thoroughly, because that also means that yet again we will likely be denied.
Probably. We are going to, I
Faker
think,
versus
mate.
Rookie. Fuck my life.
They look like frauds. We probably are going to be denied it. It sucks, doesn't it? There's just certain players, just like, it's almost like they're magnets, but it's the opposite polarities. They're just pushing apart. They can never meet. It's ridiculous, isn't it? We'll just find out later, like, Knight and Chovy just are the same person with, like, a fucking, like, glasses or something like that. That's going to have to be something like that, isn't it? Like, what's going on? Has anyone ever seen these guys in the room at the same time? This is ridiculous. The joke is, like, what he does is this, Monty. This is how you know it is the true, like, Clark Kent. Because you know the whole premise? It's actually explained at the end of one of those Tarantino movies, Kill Bill, that in a fucked up way, you can view Superman actually as, like, a condescending view of how an alien would see humans. Because when he disguises himself, look at how pathetic and servile and he has just a coward, a fool, a bore, like a buffoon. That's who he decides to mask himself as, so he can fit in, Monty, into society, instead of being Superman, like essentially like a godlike fucking like Apollonian character who embodies the spirit of the sun and vitality, So like basically in that scenario, yeah, it's mental, mate. It's just ridiculous. So I think here's the analogy. Chovy, his disguise in the LCK, she's just a boring LCK play. Just gets all the CS, just plays like totally. Obviously, if the jungler helps him, he helps. Or he's just CS's side lanes. Then he goes to the LPL. He's only team fighting, mate. He's just crazy team fight. That's his wild side he lets out when he gets off that's when he takes off the fucking mask, mate. And he just unleashes his side. That's why you've never seen them, because it's the same person. So he has to play. The problem is this, guys. He has to play both sides of the bracket every Worlds. So obviously he has to go out of one side really early so he can put his efforts on the other side. I've cracked it. There we go. I got there in the end. I got there in the end. I knew I was still going there.
But yeah, I think with this bracket, like at least in LPL, I would be excited to see JDG and EDG, possibly, LNG is an outside shot heading to MSI. I don't really know who I want from Korea to go. Like, obviously the matchup, like the matchups between T1, GenG, JDG, and EDG would all be fascinating because they're all extremely different teams from one another. I do think the Korean teams are a cut above the Chinese teams at the moment from watching this gameplay. But the thing about the LPL is you never really know until LPL playoffs, because they play so many fucking games and so many of the games are just trash versus bad teams, that teams really don't put all of their effort into the regular season. So we'll see if JDG can tighten things up in their playoff run. We're not going to get to see them play until, a couple weeks from now. So they also have a lot of time to prepare and kind of ramp up into that form. And with the star power on that roster, you'd think they would be fiercely competitive at an international event.
The problem I have is this. For LCK, I'm torn, because in the LCK bracket, I love seeing KT do these upsets and cause these crazy matches. But I actually feel like if they ended up representing Korea, there's also a world where they could just mega shit the bed. It just looks so stupid in some BO5.
I don't think so with this KT roster. I really don't. And the reason is because it's because of the dimensionalization that we've seen since halfway through the second round robin. I've talked about this a lot, but those defeats that they suffered, what was it in? Let me look. Week 5. It was the week that they got completely bodied by T1 and Dplus. No, it was week 6, I believe. Yeah, it was week 6
before they did the big streak.
Yeah, it was week 6. And they were really exposed for being somewhat one-dimensional, and then they came back, they rallied back from that week, and then the very next week they started showing off all these pick compositions that they hadn't played before. And I think the scary thing about KT's pick comps is they're not the same as what T1 does with a pick composition. Like, T1 is the pick composition that comes in off the screen, like it's like a combination of pick and poke. The thing about KT is that they will get expansive vision of an area. And then what they'll do is they will pick a bunch of champions with single target CC. So it'll be the Twisted Fate. It will be the Jax. It will be the Vi. These types of picks. And then, with a support that can lock somebody down, right? Even 80 carries that can provide some single target CC, right? Like a Varus. And we saw this in the T1 series, but if you think you are fighting them in a front to back team fight, they will find 1 point of CC on your front line, and then they will 100-0 you. Like we saw this with Zeus's Gnar, where he was just standing in the front line about to turn Mega Gnar. He got hit by 1 piece of CC, and by the time the CC was over, he was just fucking dead. And then it's just like, oh, I guess we have a 5v4 now. So it's about with KT, it's about their decisiveness and ability to chain CC from one of their players into the next CC that player has, and everybody focusing that guy down instantly. And I think that style would be extraordinarily punishing on the West, because you cannot fuck up your spacing one time, and they're able to do this to T1. They're able to win games against T1 by doing this. That's why, I mean, they won all the TF games.
Oh, they could have won the series for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I have a question though.
You know?
Do you not have any concerns about Cos?
No, not particularly. I don't. Dom touched on this a lot in Power Spike, that he thought Cuz was really unfortunate. It was unfortunate the fans decided to blame Cuz for Game 5 of that series. You have to remember that, so Cuz had some bad moments, but those bad moments were almost always linked to his teammates also fucking up at the same time. Like, yeah, he went into like try and steal the last Baron, and that was dumb, but his teammates also shouldn't have been in base. Like Chovy or Keen and BDD should not have been in the base trying to defend. They should have been trying to play the Baron. So that was just two messed up calls in a row. I think Cuz did have a pretty strong early game. We also have to remember that for whatever reason, Cuz was on GenG that game. And part of that was there were a bunch of jungle bans, and T1 first picked Wukong on blue side to deny Cuz. They were very specifically targeting Cuz. They banned the Vi, they banned the Sejuani. We saw the Elise and Lee Sin banned by KT. So we're now at like the 6th priority jungler. And I think Dom made a good point where that Lilia would probably be a lot better with this composition, and I agree with that analysis. I would have, but I don't know if Cuz really plays Lilia. It's not something that he has shown a lot of this season. So where does Cuz go after that, right? Like he's played a few games of Viego, but you have to remember that this split, here's his champion pool. Wukong, 17 games. Sejuani, 14 games. Vi, 9 games. Every other jungler he has is 3 games or fewer. They are Viego, Xin Zhao, Elise, Maokai, Zac, and Lee Sin. He wasn't even playing Maokai when Maokai was arguably like the strongest pick within the meta. So
maybe okay, but the problem with that is, doesn't that imply there are going to be problems with Cos? He's one-dimensional.
If you try and ban him out, potentially. But here's the other question. Here's the other question that we have to answer. The last time we saw KT lose, the very next week, they came back with an entirely different style of play. Right? And it was, before that, he was suffering because he was only really playing Wukong, and Sejuani was his scariest champ by a long shot. It was banned. Then they started coming up with these pick comps with Vi and Viego. So I guess like Wolf's point on our show about KT was that this was a very teachable moment from KT. Like KT has learned quickly off of their mistakes, and I don't think they're going to play a pick comp that badly again. And I do wonder if they start thinking about changing Cuz's champion priority, because that is what happened last time they lost. It's an interesting question.
Just seems like something that people could also replicate in terms of ban loss. I'll be interested to see people try and target him at least.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely was targeted, and by the end of that T1 series, but I don't think it was because his Xin Zhao was bad. He played it in the Live Sandbox series as well. I don't think it's because his Xin Zhao was bad. I think that at 54 minutes into this game, that Xin Zhao is fucking useless and will look useless no matter who's playing it. That's what I think. I think he's just bad in the ultra late game state. And I think that some whole team mistakes were blamed on Cuz. But I thought his early game was fine.
Even though people thought it was like a hilarious meme, that thing after the Hanwha Life series with that whole thing in the interview where fucking Zeka said that like he didn't understand how like the fucking Yasuo worked or whatever. What was that about? Like That's almost like he's trying to make himself a meme, like he really is just playing 2 champions ever. Like the joke even is, mate, that's the sort of champion you'd think he would play, like on the side in solo queue, wouldn't you? Like, dude, you're Korean. You're supposed to have played like 1 billion hours of the game. You don't really just play 19 games of Akali in a row in solo queue, do you? Like, surely you put the odd one in just in case. Like, I mean, what is that? What a weird scenario to be like first time, and it was like, what the fuck? What a weird situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in Hanwha's case, like the upsetting thing about them beating Dplus is, first off, Dplus obviously looked bad. But secondly, the joke I've made is that Kingen can only play well when he's on the cusp of elimination. Like, that's the only time Kingen's good, is when he can be eliminated. And then he has, apparently he's just capable of amazing flanks and teamfight engages. I don't know what it is about
you know what, Monty? It's obviously that phenomena. You know, the famous thing where apparently if, like, you know, a car goes over a baby, the mother just gets superhuman strength and can lift it off.
Yes.
Because she's just overpowered by the, you know, the anguish of her child that did. Kingen must just do that, apparently. Even though I will say this, it's not quite as cool, because this is like if Kingen himself had rolled the car onto the baby and then went, oh my God, what's going on? Oh, I'm the hero. Yep, you can thank me. As long as I'm around, you'll always be safe. Like, what? Bro, why were we down in the first place?
But I mean, watching Zeka play Chovy was really just miserable. I mean, Zeka's in a spot where he's playing Talia and Gragas and fucking Veigar, and then Chovy is basically just,
you know, the angle people don't even bother bringing up as well. Now Deft got to feel what it was like to see this bullshit from fucking Kingen and Zeka. Like, when were these guys all split? Like, even he got to experience it, Monty, like right after winning. It's so ridiculous, isn't it? I bet even he was like,
upgraded. I thought I upgraded. Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
That's
the joke is,
he should, a fun form of torture.
Next time he plays Faker, he should just walk over and shake hands and go, I apologize so badly for what happened in the World's Finals. Now I understand. It's not even League of Legends, is it? It's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. This Kingen guy, by the way, thankfully he hasn't, but he absolutely cannot keep getting away with it. He cannot keep getting away with it.
Well, he's
thankfully
not,
he didn't, and he's not going to. He's going out the playoffs next round. It's all good. It's all good.
I mean, people are worried because of memes, because of the KT choke, but I don't think there's a way that KT loses.
They're going to win that easy, mate.
Yeah, I think, you know, KT also doesn't really troll that much. I mean, they sort of do, in that when we see KT lose, they often just pick things that they can't play. Like we saw them trying to play the Lucian Nami horribly into T1 on their last regular season meeting. And I guess we saw them try and play a poke comp, which confused them, and they hurt themselves in their confusion. But they don't come in with the plan of like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like have a fun pick. And as Wolf would say, they don't happy game as much as some of the other Korean teams do. So that also lowers the chance of an upset, because you're not going to give away a game with some stupid ass like experimental picks. That's not really what KT does. They may pick things they can't play, but they're not doing it because they're experimenting. They're doing it because they genuinely think they can win. Not sure if that's better, but there we go.
Can we talk a bit about LCS, Monty?
Sure, we can talk a little bit about LCS.
Because here's the thing, mate. I saw you essentially, I didn't see the actual episodes, I know what you said on it, but I saw you essentially got set up for the Richard Lewis, where the YouTube comments like, you have shown your bias, Monty, against Double It. You hate his comeback, the success of his comeback. And it's like, how do you like his comeback today, dickhead? How do you like Double It today, dickhead?
The best part was that
so outrageous in it.
The TikTok even called me a dickhead in it, so it was easier to do that. So yeah, it was perfect. It was really perfect. But yes, I was.
This is where I was saying it the whole time. I know everyone else got hyped because they were like, they're on a winning streak though. And it's like, bro, the moment they were on the winning streak was when everyone except Cloud9 just looked whack in the fucking LCS. Like the joke was Golden Guardians and people like that were looking awesome. So you've seen how that fucking played out. Like, mate, this was outrageous. Like they always looked like frauds. And quite frankly, the only reason to believe in this 100 Thieves team in the playoffs is if you sort of think, and quite frankly, this doesn't seem to apply in 2013, that like the playoff experience will help you and, you know, somehow you'll like dig deep. None of that happened, mate. None of that was even relevant, in fact. And in fact, they don't even win the clutch games. Like, this is just whack. Like, they actually did, they were frauds all along, Monty. They were frauds all along.
I mean,
I don't know how
yes,
they won those
we knew
games, but they
that.
were frauds the whole time. It's just whack, wasn't it? And
They're
then
just
for
frauds
real,
all the way
dude,
down.
I made the joke earlier in the episode, but like it's almost true. Like, mate, can you imagine if you were someone from another region just going like I'll give you an example. Imagine, you know, some of the like what about Deft or Faker? I'm sure every now and then they'll go on like, you know, Wikipedia or Wiki or the Western site and go, what's going on in LCS? And then they'll go, oh, Double Lift and Bjergsen. I know them. I've played them before. Let's see how they're doing in the playoffs. Bjergsen is playing Zillion every game still. But is this 2023? Fucking hell, mate. How many times am I going to tune in and see this? Monty, Zillion is not a mid-lane champion in League of Legends. As like a primary pick. Like, they've actually made that whole pocket pick theme a meme, dude. They've made that a meme. How have Doublelift and Bjergsen both become memes? Here's the two angles I can't handle, right? Monty, he never even used to do this in his prime. When he picked the Zillion in his prime, it was like specifically for this comp, specifically for this situation. Now it's his go-to pick. That's what it's become in the last few years. He became a caricature. And the double lift one is the craziest because everyone's going to go, he's going to bring up that minion. No, what I'm going to bring up is this. Double lift has one of the weirdest qualities I've ever seen in a really good player at a game, which is that he can be so good. And by the way, he's in perfectly the wrong role for this. He can be so good, but he just has one random brain fart in every fucking big series. And when he has it, it could be the one where he goes after the victor. It could be where they don't go in on the 6-man sleep at that. You know, they can do all these he always has that one insane blunder. And as Loco taught me years ago, the one role that can't have the huge blunder is ADC. You're the one who has to stay alive. So, like, bro, they've both just become like ridiculous caricatures of all their worst elements because they're just not elite players right now. They're not even bad. They're both sort of like middle of the table LCS or slightly above when they have good games. But where are the players who used to just win a series because you had them in the server? Like, this is just kind of sad to watch, mate. Like, it just makes me keep thinking. It's a bit like, I mean, to be fair, he's turned it around a bit now, but it's a bit like the last split when I was watching Reckless. It's like, bro, it's not even that I'm hating on you because it's just funny and it's been the narrative. It's like, you're not even close to the shadow. You're a shadow of what you used to be at your best. Like, you've become a meme. It's sad.
Well, I think too, it certainly isn't fun to watch. I also think that 100 Thieves were really just an amazing beneficiary of evil geniuses having all the like COVID / sickness issues and not being able, and the Danny drama and everything like that. As well as some of the other teams falling off. And yeah, they did go on a win streak. But
by the way, there's an obvious joke we should probably work in there because essentially, if people don't know, at exactly the same time, evil geniuses, unironically, whoever the PR department is, fire them, became sponsored by Chevron, the oil company. Right? There's an obvious like BP oil spill type joke in there. You know, like next to Nicola Point Jameson, the joke is that's the only thing they would apologize for. Like, sorry, we're sorry with how it worked out with an LCS. Sorry about that. Like, mate, that's so ridiculous. Because you're right. Like, they had everything in the world go wrong outside the team.
It's okay. It's okay. Danny is now streaming Lost Ark without a camera to 500 viewers, Thorin. Like that's where we're at now. He's a really valuable acquisition as a streamer for their brand. He's going to provide a lot of value to their sponsors. That's just true. I don't know what you're talking about. It makes total sense that they would sign him to their creator collective. Here's
where, and I remember, here's the key thing I have to establish first, Monty. I didn't put Danny as a content creator person for Evil Geniuses. I didn't tell Danny to keep playing or being a part of the esports scene. If he has problems and if he's had a very bad time, I would absolutely recommend go to a low level of competition where it doesn't bother you as much, or go and be an amateur, or be a streamer on your own, by the way, maybe not within EG. Because if you're within EG, they've made you part of the public sort of like record now, and I can now make this critique. The obvious question would be, if there was no big problem behind the scenes and there wasn't some scandalous behavior, then the real question is, why is EG putting funds into having a really rubbish streamer? If I was like an investor in EG, I'd be like, why are we paying for that? Because it's fucking mad cover up, isn't it? Like, obviously, it's so obvious at this point in time. Like, you even get the vibe. I've watched a little bit of the streams, dude. Like, it's not that he's not trying to do it. He's just not a natural entertainer. He's just kind of a guy. It doesn't surprise me as his camera off, mate. It's not really a very entertaining, engaging experience, guys. That's not even to hate on it. It's just rubbish in it.
Yep. But going back to the LCS, so first off, as I said on Power Spike, I didn't watch the Golden Guardians versus 100 Thieves series because I was, frankly, I was spending the day with my family and my kid and petting goats with my son. And I came back and I was like, oh, fantastic. Golden Guardians beat 100 Thieves.
But you were petting goats. Golden Guardians were whooping goats' ass.
Exactly.
There you go.
We're both spending time with goats in our own ways.
There you go. Fair enough. Yeah.
But basically, I came home and I was like, fantastic. Now I never have to watch another 100 Thieves game again. Good for me. And then I didn't watch it because I just truly do not care about that series in any way, shape, or form. And like, I was happy to see the result. I watched the end where Doublelift like needed to auto attack a Candyman and got caught and died and went through the game.
That's why if you saw it on Twitter,
I was like, that's enough shitty lol for me for the day.
Someone connect this back because you know there's that clip where it was on like Power Spike or whatever where Dom makes that point that he's always seen Doublelift do these macro calls where you trade the Baron for the Nexus or a Dragon for the Nexus. So that's why I like added Dom on Twitter and I just said, bro, he just traded a minion for the Nexus essentially. Like that's the most next level. That's like some Donald Trump shit. Like this is the worst trade of all time. Like that's so insane.
The worst trade deal in history of trade deals.
It's just so bad, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dom talked about your tweet on Power Spike. It was funny.
It's just so ridiculous.
So anyway, I'm just gonna be straight up with you guys. Like that was the one series I didn't watch of all the LCS playoffs because I didn't give a fuck. And like I honestly, guys, I just can't be bothered to watch 5 games of VODs of Golden Guardians versus 100 Thieves. I can't do it, man. When we got all these like glorious LCK playoff series that I'm watching and all these LEC games, just can't do it. So I won't comment on that, but I will comment on the FlyQuest series where they got completely bopped and we got to see the Zillion come out in game 1 of that series, which of course Vikla just immediately plays Veigar. Turns out it's really difficult to use Zillion ult against a Veigar because you have to guess which targeted 50% HP that he's going to one-shot. And if you ult somebody, he'll just ult. The Veigar will just ult somebody else in response, and then you just don't have Chrono Shift. So that was pretty entertaining. I mean, I was a bit surprised because I thought maybe we've been seeing more Malphite in Europe and Korea, and I was a bit surprised that we didn't actually get to see as much of it against 100 Thieves because Doublelift has basically been one-tricking Jinx throughout these playoffs, and I thought, maybe somebody will just play Malphite into him. It happened from Evil Geniuses against Luger, but didn't actually show up in the games that we saw against 100 Thieves.
You know, I didn't realize actually that's the only thing that does haunt me a little bit from the LeTigress clip. It's not even the dragon thing. It's that every time someone says the name Luger, I'm gonna like get that meme of like a Luger with the blood running through his veins. Because listen, like the problem with that is it was just bad, like you know, fucking like you know, it's like someone doing like a paper, like write a poem at the end, like it just wasn't good. The imagery didn't work. Yeah, by the way, it also said nothing about the game, so I'm just gonna be haunted by that forever every time the name Luger, so I mentioned that one.
And arguably, Luger had very little blood running through his veins in some of these series. I mean, that series against EG, he looked like a corpse. So
now here's the thing: if LeTigress was like, say, a nurse taking blood from the players for like a drug test, she'd be great. She'd be, you know, I think she's actually perfectly qualified for that job. You know, I just can't.
Oh man!
Obviously, someone here's the meme, guys. Someone get that movie, How to Train Your Dragon, and Photoshop LeTigress in there. There you go. Problem solved, right? Whatever.
Yeah, I think FlyQuest, they just easily dispensed with 100 Thieves. Even that game 2, I think my favorite thing was FlyQuest 100 Thieves forgetting that flanks existed.
That's mental, isn't it? Because you've been saying, here's the one thing you never get credit for.
Wait. 100 Thieves like, wait, you're telling me that teams can group as 5? And that they come from more than one direction at the same time? What the fuck? This is what's so frustrating about watching NA League of Legends, guys, is the execution of team plays is just so fucking bad that it's almost inconceivable to think of them beating any of the good Asian teams.
The thing is, Monty, you literally have actually, no joke, that has been a bugbear of yours for the Bjergsen teams in playoffs for years. That the whole reason Bjergsen could always get off all these weird picks and weird comps and they could play is because no one could ever, who was a top laner, do like a real flank. Like you never got real, like decisive flanks that threaten you. People just straight head on fight you 5v5 and some like mad, like moth to the flame. Like the joke is someone finally did it and it just made it, just destroyed you completely. Like Bjergsen was trained by 9 years of LCS or whatever. I think this could never happen, Monty. Like, I don't blame him.
You know how physicists describe how fourth dimensional beings might work compared to humans, and they usually use the analogy because we can't comprehend a fourth dimension of time as anything but linear, right? So the example they make is that they try and compare living in 2 dimensions to living in 3 dimensions. And so the concept of you just being like a dot on a paper and there's like a line in front of you and you can't conceive of getting over the line, or like, whereas in 3 dimensions, if we see like a wall, even if it's like a short wall that's, we can just hop over a 1-foot wall. But if that 1-foot wall is placed in 2 dimensions, you would just have to go around it, right? And that's the analogy that I would make here with NA teams, is like they are playing like 2-dimensional League of Legends, and Asian teams play 3-dimensional League of Legends, and it's like they can't even comprehend about what the 3rd dimension could be. And it's the same thing. It's like that same functioning concept. And it just feels like as soon as you enter NA, you go into the 2-dimensional world and you're totally incapable of actually existing in that 3rd dimension.
You can go back, guys, go to the early episodes of this split. And I said the one thing you don't want is 100 Thieves to make MSI, because like now you see why it would have been so terrible if they'd have fluked their way in. Thankfully, apparently it was never even a possibility. That was just a mirage during the fucking round robin. They were never actually real. It was always false. It's all good. 100 Thieves. Well, I can see 5, but
It's like the Matrix, guys. This is what talking to NA fans has been like for my entirety of League of Legends. It's that they when they're offered the red pill of like watching Korean League of Legends, they're like, no thanks, I'd like to just have the blue pill and eat some good old American steak in the Matrix. I'm just like, okay, buddy.
Yes.
That's how it feels like talking to these people sometimes. Their level of delusion that they're not truly living in the Matrix environment. So
also, I'll just put this out there. I know this is like a weird tangent, but in the LEC, because of the last week, they've sort of redeemed the narrative. Because, the whole split, they made it about Reckless for some reason. Like, he was the king of the LEC when he came in initially. Then every fucking VOD thumbnail or video thumbnails like Reckless. Like, even though Fnatic was terrible. It's like they've just decided to revert to the old scripts. Because the weird thing I thought about this split of LCS was, am I missing something, guys? Or did every single week involve some weird Doublelift storyline? It was always like Doublelift and Prince, that was about 3 episodes. It was like Cutie Cinderella and Doublelift, like that was about 2 or 3 episodes.
They even have that cringe humor segment catching up with Doublelift.
When he's not there half the time, and that's the joke.
No, he's not there ever. He's not there ever.
That's the joke. It's so sad, isn't it? I know, mate. When I watched that...
He also didn't show up to playoffs, so there you go.
Here's the problem with that, is this is one of those moments like, well, some of them eventually do turn the corner, like the Breaking Bad one, when everyone, if you don't know, guys, everyone used to say Breaking Bad was like the best show ever, and I used to be like, I think it's crap, and I watched it, I would never watch it again. But now people have sort of come around to my position. Along those lines, we've already seen, no joke, maybe they're unaware because they're so unoriginal, it's all parallel thinking, Monty. Almost every broadcast that does skits has now done a Between Two Ferns style skit. Almost every single, and here's the problem I have with it. Look, maybe it's not my cup of tea, but I don't even find that guy funny, the real one. I find those
Eric
interviews
Andre?
like I don't know. It's the fucking Zach Galifianakis guy. Or whatever.
Zach Galifianakis is Between Two Ferns, but I think it's more Eric Andre.
They're both the same shit. The problem is that's not my style of humor. So to me, I don't find it funny at all. So a bad version of that is even less funny to me. Like, this is the thing. Mark Z can do a funny skit if you give him the right material. A bunch of these people could do funny. I just don't know why they keep reverting to that one. Like, because the problem is this: to actually make that gag work, like that's a good 30-second gag, Monty. They do the real whole 5-minute segment. Like, holy shit, this drags on. Like, it just those segments die on their ass for me, man. I can't handle them.
I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. People seem to like it. Whatever.
That's the worst thing. Everyone's just like, wow, amazing job. How did you think it? How did you think that idea up? Like, holy shit, fucking hell.
Not my cup of tea either.
Okay.
So, going back to the FlyQuest series, it was really just playoff impact styling as well. It was everything that we thought FlyQuest could be. I'm still concerned about FlyQuest. I still think Cloud9 is probably the better team in terms of coordination and synergy at this point in time. There's still a lot of FlyQuest does seem disconnected at times. Like, you don't see the same mid jungle synergy that you've seen with FlyQuest. They seem to be discombobulated as a group, even though they have very good individual players. We can argue about whether Ayla has been better than Winsome. It just hasn't come together.
Do we
as
have to
nicely.
argue? Can't we just admit that he's not? You were just being kind there, man. He hasn't. He's just been whack.
Yeah,
Don't know why they waited for this guy, quite frankly.
And in spite of M&S sometimes having very bad games, Cloud9 has proven that they can actually power through those games as a team and still pull out the wins. They did 2-0 FlyQuest in the last week of competition, if you include the rematch in the tiebreaker. So I think it's hard. I think it's going to be hard for FlyQuest to win the split, but I do think we'll get a run back of that C9 versus FlyQuest final.
The thing is, though, I just want to see this match. Like, it's obviously the only real match that has, like, true, like, could be good League of Legends, maybe. Could actually have some proper comps. Certainly, yeah, at least it's a real game,
Yeah, and we're going to get it on Thursday. So that actually will, I think, be quite exciting. Now, EG versus
Have you noticed,
Guardian,
Monty, how even though I get why the owners in the past might not want it, etc., for people like me and you, it is just actually, look, even though I realised for the live angle it wasn't good for you in the past, like, I actually just like the fact that leagues are on different days now, mate. It's not like that weekend where it's like, oh, God, there's like a million games
it's better
to catch
for me.
Up. I love getting the stories going through the week. I watched this one day, this another day. It's awesome.
We can head back to what I said about the schedule changings for LCS when it happened, which is that I thought they were a good thing. Everybody else was freaking the fuck out about it. Now, I thought the 12 p.m. start was bad, but as soon as they moved it to 2 p.m. Pacific, I was like, oh, well, this now makes a lot more sense. It is literally exactly what I would have done if I was in charge of that situation, because you want the European viewership. Actually, let me put it this way. If your goal is maximizing viewership, no matter where those viewers come from, and you care about European viewership, this is what you do. This is absolutely what you do. And I think, honestly, that, from talking to people who are around the broadcast, I'm going to be careful so I don't reveal anything here. From talking to people who are around the broadcast, they did have quite good data about kind of the age demographic of the LCS audience, which is tending to be older now that LCS has been around for 10 years. And like the Zoomers are all off playing Valorant and Fortnite and whatever the fuck they're doing. And so moving it to a weekday is better. I mean, it's just straight up, it's objectively better for me, because even though it starts at 2 p.m., many people who are in esports, not all of them, but many people have white collar jobs where they can kind of like throw it on a second monitor if they're working from home, and watch the games. Or it's a lot easier to watch the games when you get home from work in the evening on a weekday, rather than it sucking up your entire afternoon on Saturdays and Sundays. Like, it's just easier for working adults to watch it this way. Spare me your comments, people, with like, oh, well, I work a night shift and this is whatever. You're a minority. I think most people, this has been a very big success, and it's proven out because the regular season viewership, I think, has actually increased this split compared to last split. By like 10%. It's not a lot, but it's better. And I was encouraged by this. And as you were saying, Thorin, having to watch LEC run straight into LCS for 10 best of ones on Saturday and Sunday was fucking unbearable. Yeah. And then you couple that with the fact that there were also best of threes in LCK and LPL that were happening immediately before LEC. And it's just like, holy shit, man, my entire weekend is ruined if I want to follow this game. No,
it's used to suck.
So I think it has been, I think we can take a look, and all you people who are freaking out about this, it has been objectively successful. And I think it was a good idea. And I also
I think it's the only reason some people even watch some of these series in LCS, mate. Because as you say, if you have to choose, or you only have like as Monty's saying, if you watch LCK on the Saturday, you're not watching LCS. You'd have watched like fucking like 14 hours of League of Legends at that point in time. Like you're just not. Like the difference is if it's like a third, maybe you watch the game. You know, like oh, is that on? The other leagues aren't. I'm waiting for Friday for the fucking LEC. You know, well, it's now Saturday, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, I frankly even prefer to have some of the LEC games on Mondays now because
Quite cool,
again,
isn't it? Yeah.
again, it's just easier. I can't because I have a family and that I would like to occasionally spend time with. Now, I do spend my Sundays working, but Saturdays I try and take during the day off. And it's a lot easier for me to catch up on games now because I'm able to watch more of them during like a normal fucking work week. Which even if this isn't your job, I think that's true for people where generally they want their weekends freed up, and having 5 hours from, you know, of your weekend afternoon on both days sucked up by the LCS is just not ideal. So anyway, LCS playoffs. The last thing to comment on really is EG looking better than we might have expected, but again, they had all of those issues.
Surely. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they should never have.
Mate.
They should never have been at the seed that they were in the playoffs. Like they are the better team compared to 100 Thieves. I think it's unfortunate both that CLG played quite badly against them, and then also CLG hit them in the lower part of the bracket, because I think CLG probably
we'll never know how good CLG is now.
Yeah. I think for me it's a bummer because I would have really liked to have seen CLG versus 100 Thieves or versus Golden Guardians rather than having EG and CLG hit each other so early, because I have a feeling that CLG is probably the 4th best team in the league. But
they probably are, mate. They probably have. It's like I said before the split, though. The sad thing about CLG is this, and look, it's not just like the NA angle to it, but it's just the fact that they don't have still players that have massive amounts of playoff success in their history. So if you look at the team, it's just, even when they are actually the better team, it's been the same thing for the last splits, right? You just know somehow when they go against the big dog, they'll sort of break down in a way in the round robin. Maybe they wouldn't. They'd give them a great game. Like this was the split, by the way, where finally I see why Cloud9 was even considering Parler Fox like 2 years ago. Because I always thought, like, man, that was a fucking bullet you dodged there. Like, if you imagine if you'd have put him in the mid lane. Actually, now he's sort of developed into a player who has some promise. Like, he has some pop-offs.
He might be a top 3 mid laner in the league, frankly.
He's some legit pop-off games.
Yeah, I mean, that is also a testament to how horrifically weak the mid lane was this split. And I wouldn't have, the other caveat here is that I wouldn't have considered Eminez for All Pro because I think he played too few games.
Played 10, I think it was.
Yeah.
Or was it 11, 10 or 11 or something?
Yeah. And 3 of those games were like straight ints, by the way. Like, you know, his first game and then there's a couple of Jace games were just
the problem with him is people were just getting it. They were falling in love with the height of the peak. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So obviously he looked cracked in some of the games. Yeah.
And also I think it's just unfortunate that Ablaze Olive decided to retire because he was kind of on the up and up over the last couple of years.
And had pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. He had his own pop-off game. So that's kind of a bummer. So then your choices are like Vikla, whose laning phase in the last half has been super suspect. So you kind of default to Gory. And then you've got, you know, Jojo Pyun throughout the like everybody had such huge up and downs in the mid lane that, you know, even Maple starts to, like Palafox and Maple start to enter the conversation potentially. So yeah, I think mid lane was just like super duper weak this split in LCS, but that also means that players kind of on the outside and some of the worst teams are going to have an opportunity to maybe make their case for being top 3 in the league.
Oh, no, I would actually say one of the bizarre things about both LCS and LEC is there's way more actual parity in terms of talent spread across the league when you look who's performing well. Like, there are players on, but like, as you say, obviously Maple and them aren't even in the playoffs. Like, some of them had some good games, mate, if you go look at this split. Like, there's a reason why they were in contention. CLG in the regular split was legit. Like, they had a bunch of good games. Golden Guardians was way better than everyone thought they would be. Like, the joke is it's actually only some of the big names like Doublelift and Bjergs who kind of shit the bed. Aside from that, I mean, obviously, we've made this point in the past episode. Jensen was like one of the best players on a terrible team you'll ever see. Jankos in Europe is amazing on Heretics, even though they're terrible. Like, the actual, that's one thing that's making the round robin still fun to some degree, is like, at least you have like so much talent that you get like the odd game where these players, if you have these players that we say, you can have a pop off from a mid lane if the mid lane talent's so spread out. Of course.
Yeah.
You can have one game from them.
Yeah, I think ultimately though, it feels like we're going to get the Cloud9 FlyQuest game. EG
Probably
probably
they both
isn't.
just go to MSI. It's just much harder.
Yeah,
they go in it,
probably EG isn't good enough to beat either of those two teams. And then we get the Cloud9 versus FlyQuest rematch in the finals. It feels, I think EG absolutely could make it to the finals. They're definitely like the dark horse, but I think it's not the most likely outcome.
I'm just going to say that Fudge did say in that interview a few weeks ago to Travis Gafford that 100 Thieves would be playing Cloud9 in the final. So all I'm going to say is stay away from our sponsors. Only we are allowed to use that product and promote that product, and our fans only are allowed to buy it with the code LFN. TheFreezePack.com. Because I don't know what he was smoking with that prediction.
.com, that's right.
I don't know what he was smoking with that prediction, but that was a wild one right there. You must just really love WTBX.
I mean, that's what we can say about NA fans, especially 100 Thieves fans, to kind of put a cap on the LCS situation, is that you guys were all up there with the hopium, just huffing the hell out of all of that hopium for 100 Thieves after they reeled off that win streak at the end of the season. But then reality set in. But if you'd like to escape reality for a little bit longer, you can head on over to thefreezepipe.com and use your code LFN to make yourselves feel better about 100 Thieves. And probably, I mean, this is great too, because 420 comes after the NA playoffs, right? Which means it's before MSI. So that's the perfect time to get yourself a freeze pipe so that you can really chill out during MSI and not be so concerned about NA teams' performances against Europe, China, and Korea. So thanks a lot to the freeze pipe for the sponsorship of Last Free Nation. And also thanks to them because they re-upped with us recently. So you get to see even more and some fun stuff we've got planned for you.
Yes.
Special things. We
won't tell you what, but you will enjoy it. Like, put it this way, I'll give you a little hint. We've done some of these things in the past. That's all I'll say for people who are true fans. You might have an idea what we're going to do that'll be fun. By the way, in that scenario as well, just like someone who should try out treat the freeze pipe, we do want all the smoke. But the problem is, it's hot and irritating, which is also, by the way, me and Monty's code names in the industry behind the scenes when we're at those parties, with the masks on, whatever.
Very good. And also thanks to you guys for going out and buying all the freeze pipes. You guys have been killing it.
By the way, tweet at us and tag us if you buy one. We'll
tag the freeze pipe. They fucking love this shit, man. They have been really happy with you guys. Who could have known that our fans loved freeze pipes so much? Don't blame them though. Good product.
I mean, it's like I say though, Monty, the joke is we did just find the perfect sort of like thing to ask our fans to do. Like, right, guys, listen, I know it sounds, let's have a heart to heart, right? Could you guys possibly buy like weed paraphernalia to support us? Oh, you can. Oh, shit. Well, problem solved then, yeah. Right. Didn't know it was going to be that easy. Nice. Think we found our audience, Monty. And by the way, does anyone want to come and watch a Kevin Smith movie with me? Like, we can fucking start doing that soon if you want. We'll have a watch party or something. Yeah, watch for clerks.
But I will say this again, guys. The single best way to support us is to support our sponsors. So you guys really have delivered on that front. And we will have more sponsors for you soon that you should also support. If you like the products, and we try and get the good products for you guys. All right. You want to switch to LEC for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. Because
I have to say, I didn't watch all of the LEC games this past weekend, but I watched a good number of them.
The problem is, basically, like I say, it's not just talent in the LEC. The parity of the LEC is ridiculous, mate. Like, the amount of up and down matches and flips back and forwards, it's all over the place. Like, as much as, like, for example, if you want to talk about Fnatic did look way better, and they did actually have a couple of games that were good, and they even did actually, they could have won that G2 game way earlier. They did have this whole turnaround, but at the same time, the league also just looks like, mate, it's night and day. People just go from being really good one game to like just terrible the next. It's really weird, like how up and down the round robin is in this particular league.
Yeah, I do think that that's kind of a problem with this format. We discussed part of the pitfalls, which is that playing a round robin, I am just not a fan of playing like best of one round robins into best of threes, because I think you're testing for two different skills, which is that playing against three different teams in best of ones in a single weekend is very different than playing like a single best of three against a specific opponent within a week or with several days of preparation. So that's kind of annoying, because even though I'm not a huge fan of the LCK and LPL formats, at least they are more consistent with what they're testing for. And so it can be, I would say, somewhat anomalous. And also, I think rewards the round robin rewards teams that do, of course, have a great deal of like fundamentals and consistency, but maybe also have targetable weaknesses that if an opponent really preps for them, or you can actually like kind of iterate on pinching champion pools, that can be a problem, which is why I guess I'm a little bit, it's a little weird that BDS ended up in first place, because I don't think that anybody really believes that
Nobody
BDS
did.
is the best team in LEC,
Oh.
but they have been, to their credit, they have been very
They won
well
the
coached.
games. Yeah, you got to give them
They
credit.
win the games. They've been extremely consistent, and they are arguably the solidest team, the most solid team in overall fundamentals, which will be rewarded in these round robins where you don't have a lot of time to prepare for a single opponent. So credit to them for that. And I do think that they are good. And I have been very pleasantly surprised by Adam, considering that he had such a,
for sure,
for me, disappointing debut to his professional career, where it felt like he was the square peg that was trying to be jammed through the round hole, and that he couldn't actually be a round peg if he wanted to. And I think we've seen a big evolution in his career where he still has all the strengths he used to have, but now he can also play meta picks. And now it doesn't feel like his team is necessarily playing as heavily around him, that he can adapt his play style to the situation to still suit it. So big credit to Adam. I think he's had a remarkable development.
If people don't know why basically most of the Western analysts, except the ones on mad fucking copium, didn't give Adam credit for the Fnatic run, it's because not only was he just only like fucking like two tricking those champions that he plays or whatever the fuck into like weird matchups, but also, quite frankly, it's why, if you notice, the same analysts gave way more praise to Whippo's jungle role swap, because they were like, wow, he made that work, and he sort of like was able to like help Adam, and like everyone thought that just shows how cracked Whippo is. His understanding of the game obviously came from top lane himself. But if you looked at when Adam went down into BDS initially, he looked terrible that first split. It's not a surprise to me he got sent back to the fucking shadow realm of the ERLs, mate. But I think this guy totally deserves now. He's actually good as well. Here's the thing people have missed. Even though he is still, I wouldn't say he's like one-dimensional. He's just got a very set playing style. Mate, as idiosyncratic as he is, it works his strengths. Like, it's not just the picks either.
Yep.
If you have someone who's just like a weak laner, he's going to find angles to fucking kill him, mate. He's going to bully him. He actually will. So even if, we all loved watching that LS video where he just broke down how the guy didn't understand wave states. Yeah, there's certain bigger picture concepts he doesn't understand. I wouldn't want to see this guy, spoiler, at MSI. He's not going to be, let's be real. But I wouldn't want to see that. But in LEC and domestic play, there's a lot of top laners, mate, can get a 1v1 solo bolo from fucking Adam. Like, props to him. And as you say, he's integrated into the team now. The bigger thing for me is this. If anyone wants to say, because you can in the round robin because of the format, say, well, this game here, maybe someone should have beaten BDS, or with this draft, they should have. Dude, BDS even had games they didn't win this split that they could have. This team you have to just give it up to someone when they win that many games against teams like, remember, before the split started, if I showed you the vitality in the G2 rosters and I said BDS finishes ahead of them, you'd say it's no way. So just, like you say, mad props to the coaching staff as well. Coaching staff just killed it. And Crown Shot is still just amazing. What a fucking great player he is I don't know how he's made this level up, mate. He was always good, but now he is really good.
I mean, he is, but I still can't believe that he was just sitting on this BDS team bench while XMatty was there. And like, I had conversations with Crown Shot, and like that was really hard on him at the time. Like, and I tried my best to be like, I really believe you deserve to be in the LEC, and tried to buck him up a little bit. And I'm super happy for his success now. Like, but it is bizarre sometimes that these players just kind of get relegated to the ERLs when they clearly have the talent to be a starting player within the LEC. And sometimes that's budgetary issues. Sometimes that's like a team makes a decision to like field XMatty. Meanwhile, all the other teams have already signed 80 carries. So you just kind of get stuck in that scenario. But
we actually had Grabs on our episode of Best Damn League Show, right? And his reasoning has a logic to it. The problem is it just sucks if you Crown Shot. Basically, his logic was apparently XMatty's one of the only players in the team who had sort of like a grinder mindset and like a never quit mindset. And apparently some of the others in the team were sort of like lazy people. And essentially he thought like, I need XMatty to be my culture leader, basically. So essentially Grabs is sort of inadvertently, you'll notice there, basically admitting Crown Shot's probably better in the position. But because the weird thing that Grabs revealed, which fair play, was very good defense. defense, is he said the unique thing he had as his job when he joined BDS is he had to actually on some level manage both teams at the same time, Monty, the LEC team and the team that plays in the RLs. And that meant as a result that when he sees he's not winning LEC, he's supposed to try and win EU Masters if you get that premise, you know.
Right.
So I get the look, that all's great, but if you return to the crowd shot point, essentially, like, you're sort of admitting, yeah, crowd shot was just trapped. Like, even if he played well, he couldn't get in the team. Like, that's why it sucks. I agree with you, mate, because I've never seen this guy be bad in LEC. People talk like, yeah, he was on some bad teams. He was always like one of the better players on them. And quite frankly, the first thing I'm thinking of right now, look, I know we all got tricked by Neon last year. I know we're all a little bit reticent to take people from the smaller teams in Vethio and put them on the bigger teams. But I tell you what, mate, here's the difference. Those players, like Neon actually is the journeyman in his career. It was only last split that he was amazing. Vethio, he's a very, very young player, still only played in certain teams that have seemingly catered to him. Crownshot is a veteran now. He's played so many different teams, so many years. I believe he could slot him into a team. Like, the joke is, look, maybe not now. Maybe he's getting his form back. Who knows? But if Fnatic wants another ADC, I'd be getting Crownshot, mate. Like, just an obvious. Why not try it? He's looked so good in all these games the whole year, guys. I'm hyped actually for what they can do in groups, because this is the thing. I don't believe they can actually be a team that goes to MSI. I just can't believe when they get the best of fives, they're going to win. We'll see. But if they prove me wrong, but in groups, they can fuck it up. In the best of threes, mate, it could be fun.
I think that's part of what happens, though, when you are a team that has solid fundamentals with a kind of unique identity that BDS has with Adam and now Astralis has with Leader, which is that teams are not going to be able to deeply prepare for your weird quirks in a best of one when they've got everybody else to prepare for.
Exactly. Remember, there's the core concept, guys. When people play to the meta, you get to practice for like 8 teams at once. When someone plays really weird, unless they're T1 and it's like the leader of your league you have to beat, you just don't, well, sorry, we'll just put like a little bit of effort and hope it works until we get to the BO5, you know?
Right.
It's just reality, isn't it?
Let's be super honest. Was anybody really targeting BDS in any week as the team we have to beat, right?
Nope.
I think probably teams were prepping a lot heavier for like G2, Vitality. These guys probably faced a lot more
SK
of
Gaming.
SK, considering their performance last split, right? So I think at the end of the day, like teams like BDS and Astralis really benefited from that. And as much as I love Leader, and I think that it's awesome to have him in LEC, and it's awesome to have Astralis doing well, because they have the group of players on Astralis is just really exciting. Like, the combination of Leader and Junghoon is like fucking fun. Like, those are just fun players to watch. But I don't think seriously that they are going to take best of series against top teams. They are limited. And even though their limitations are, in fact, what make them entertaining, it's not going to probably make them a championship team in the LEC.
And also, if they ever were going to be tested against the teams that you'd think would have like BOX quality, look at the group they've drawn now, guys, in the fucking group stage. Like, by coming first, that's your reward. You got G2, a lot of people think spiritually the best team in the LEC.
Sure, yeah.
SK, the most dangerous dark horse, except for BDS themselves, if you want to say it that way. And then Koi, here's the thing about Koi, they're not good, but they won't die. You know what I mean? Like, they will not just fucking pass away and become terrible. Every time you think they're bad, they just go ahead and win a game or win a series. So, like, it's going to be hard to get out.
They're also much more veteran when it comes to
easily
series.
So the problem is it's going to be hard just to get out of the group, like I say. So the idea they're going to get to best of fives, if they can, God bless them, then I'll give me more props as the coaching staff. But I just feel like you did a great round robin, and sadly, because of the rest of the league's results, you actually ended up with the harder group, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess we should talk about Fnatic a little bit. I think Oscarinen, his improvement, in spite of all the criticism that he's been facing, has been quite inspiring. Like, I mean, he really got shit.
Dude, everyone wanted him, literally, no joke. Everyone wanted him literally replaced. Like, they all thought it's like an Abidaga thing last split. They were like, why don't you bring someone else in, even an ERL player? Like, I tell you what, fair play to him. He had some pretty clean games.
Yeah. I think the criticism appears to have either unfazed him or powered him up in certain ways. And it's looking a lot better. So it's nice to see that performance. He also, as a rookie player, could have just had nerves, because the implications were that Fnatic was doing better in scrims than they were doing on stage, and that their stage results were actually quite surprising. That said, I mean, I don't think this team is going to win a title. Like, that's not really.
They're not getting out of this group. I'm telling you that now. They're not getting out of this group. I'm just going to be a hater. I don't care. They don't get out of this group.
I mean, maybe they do.
Listen,
Astralis,
maybe they
Fnatic,
can.
and Mad Lions are all kind of a toss-up, I would say.
I would say they're close with Astralis. We'll see on that one. I still think Astralis is a bit of a canny team. Mad Lions, maybe they could beat. They've had a lot of bad games this split. I think Vitality is going to murk them, so I hope they play, quite frankly. Not least because the Opset versus Fnatic storyline. Delicious. Absolutely delicious.
I mean, there's Vitality did have some shaky games this past week, and like Perks hasn't looked as good this
No,
split.
he's had a pretty much a downturn this whole split, yeah. Week
And
by week, it's getting worse, unfortunately. The rest of the team looks good though in times.
it does feel like though we can't have a week where like all of Vitality looks good.
Yep.
Like last week, like Bo was kind of running it down. This week,
Yep.
like Perks was struggling a little bit. Last game against Koi was super clean, but Koi's early game is such a tragedy at this point in time that
That's
kind of
easy
whatever.
mode, yeah,
It's almost a
exactly.
perfect game though, almost perfect game, which is pretty crazy. Hopefully this team can like actually get all on the same page playing well together for these playoffs, because I really desperately want to see this team at MSI for the international competition, so need them to do well.
We're so close. We're so close to actually getting all the really good teams at MSI. Can we just please have it? Or at least the really good rosters. Maybe the rosters I want, because the other thing I've always thought, unfortunately, about League that does suck a little bit is, right, when you have all these international tournaments in Counter-Strike, that is the regular season if people don't understand. So it's just smaller international tournaments versus bigger international tournaments. So you never actually get this scenario where it's like you're desperate to see people. But the worst thing about League, it's like the example we gave earlier of Dplus, is like by the time MSI had arrived, Dplus could have come completely out of their funk, adapted to the you know what I mean? Like, so much could have changed. Patches would have changed. Like, that's the downside of League, is like, you think it's like, oh, we want the best teams now. It's like, you just want the best teams in theory. Because you hope, like, remember the downside as well is if someone does like an underdog run in one patch in one region, are they actually then going to translate that to international play on a different patch against a different team? Probably not. You know what I mean? That's the downside. That's what I always worry about.
Yeah, no, it's a fair concern. I don't think the patch is going to change that much. As far as I know from previous announcements that Riot made, the patch is going to be 13.6 for MSI.
What are the main changes on that?
Very few changes. Nerfs to Aurelion Sol, Veigar, and Yuumi, which are needed. I mean, I am still scared about Yuumi at MSI because I think it's going to be enabled, which is really shitty. They buffed Ash Galio.
So that's how
Talon,
they get
and
us,
Vayne.
Monty. See, I didn't know how they do it. I'm always waiting for the penny to drop in fucking League of Legends, Monty. So in the same way as like when finally carry champions came back to League of Legends, was when literally my favorite player, Flame, got fucking benched and he didn't get to play the games. And Acorn used to play, a fucking tank player, used to play instead of him. Like, brilliant. And so basically in that scenario, here's the cursed monkey paw that they got us with, Monty. I was thinking, well, this new format, it's going to be amazing. Who can't wait for MSI, all those extra games? And they were like, all right, Thorin, you want extra games? Padme meme, like Riot, like, I'm going to make sure there's lots of extra games for you, Thorin. Not with something weird like Yuumi in every game though, right? Yes. Like, come on, man. So now it's just going to be 15 games of Yuumi all the time in every playoff series. Come on.
I mean, hopefully not.
It better not be like permaban every game. That's going to ruin the draft.
It could be 13-7 as well. Like, we're still not sure what's going on. And there are like a million jungle
When did
nerfs.
you find out stuff like that, though?
So, on Twitter from the designers, typically.
How do you plan for that then? What the fuck? What if your team?
Yeah, well, they haven't officially announced which one it is because I think the designers are still tweaking the game. But 13-7, just to go over it really quickly, has nerfs to Rammus, Veigar, Olaf, Sejuani, Vi, Wukong, Lee Sin, Zeri, and Annie. So a fuck ton of the meta junglers. And has buffs to Azir, which was hurt by some of the changes they made on previous patches, Katarina, Callista, Graves, Alistar, and Yasuo, which is, could be interesting. It's a lot
Graves
of
buffs especially are fun. I always like
the Graves buffs and then all the rest of the jungle nerfs kind of make me scared. But we'll see.
That's the fucking LPL buff right there, mate. Bring in the Graves, bring it in. And also Paul loves Graves, by the way. He's cracked on it too.
Oh yeah. I think the Yuumi thing is still really disturbing because even though they nerfed Yuumi, they didn't fix any of the fundamental problems with Yuumi as a champion in terms of her untargetability. I'm hoping they nerfed her enough, but she's so strong in professional play that I'm scared. I'm scared that we're going to see another Yuumi permaban.
we've discussed this on many other champions in the past, but for me, the obvious framing and characterization of the champion Yuumi goes like this. The reason, unfortunately, it cannot ever be balanced is because pro play and solo queue are so different. So the problem is, for me, to ever have it be viable in pro play so it isn't broken would mean an idiot in solo queue in gold and iron can't play it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it would just do nothing essentially at that point in time. Therefore, as a champion, it would only exist in pro play. And another downside of League of Legends, sadly, is because Riot wants pro play to be an advert for the game, they don't want it to be like some... Imagine if no one ever played a Yuumi game, ever in solo queue, but then every time you turned on LCS, they were playing Yuumi. It would actually make you think like you weren't watching the same game. It's just such a... Because the problem with that champion is just too game-breaking, isn't it? Like, when it works, it's too good. I always thought, mate, that's the ultimate one where, like, if you could go back in time, surely that's the one you remove. I don't care about the other ones people cried about in history casted or whatever. You can tweak those, Monty. There's always, and also they would always have like the real counterplay aspect, like you bash it in early and then it doesn't get strong. Like the Yuumi one's just like it had to be broken and perma banned against all the good teams when it was powerful. It just ruined draft basically.
Yep. No, it's brutal. I mean, obviously I'm not a fan of some other champions like Aphelios as well, because I think their design, even though their design is good from an interesting gameplay perspective, it's their design is so fucking opaque that it's very annoying. Very annoying.
And also, I'll just say this. One of the reasons I've always thought it's actually a bit unfair when everyone critiques people when they play against champions that are like untargetable or whatever. Because you know the famous thing people do is like when an Olaf runs at you, Monty, loads of teams, even in pro play to this day, are still attacking it while it's on the ult, right? That's because you're not actually consciously thinking about what you're doing at every moment, guys. Part of it, you just react. And unfortunately, your normal instincts tell you when someone charges into the fucking front line, like, attack this guy. So I know it's mad. It's the same reason why people still instinctually just dump everything on the support when they have to. Like, it's like that aspect of people's brains. People can be quite primitive, even when they're pro in that sense, guys. Like, they sort of do just react like instinctually sometimes. So it just makes everyone look like they're shit at the game, even though it's just like that particular character has such a unique, totally unique angle that there isn't any other character that works like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't blame these pros sometimes for not getting it. It's really hard to keep in your mind.
Yep. No. Do you want to talk about LPL playoffs just a little bit?
Yeah, go on then. What's hyping you on this one? Because I've been waiting forever just to see what the bloody bracket would be. Obviously, like, please, because the bracket, if people don't know, was going to be so important on this one. There's so many interesting matchups we could have made.
So I'm a bit sad that top OMG and LNG all ended up in the same half of the bracket, because those are all teams that I potentially might like to see in double elimination, whereas I'm pretty far out on Weibo right now just because of their inconsistency.
I'm just so scared. I'm so scared. Top's just going to lose to OMG. Monty, you just ruined that playoff storyline already.
I mean, that would be pretty fun.
I'm so scared. Look, OMG, I love the style of play. It's a mega LPL style, but it just ruined. Like you say, every time I'm just like, how's it going to go wrong for Rookie this split, though? You know what I mean? Like, just always something goes wrong. It's mental.
I think with top esports, though, that we can't discount the fact that the veteran players on this roster could absolutely just make a run through the entire bracket.
Could win some of these series too. Yeah, of course. They've got some mega players. Tian could actually pop off, of course.
Look, that's why I'm not so upset about top esports, because here are the two options. They continue their current performance and bomb out before they ever hit double elim, and therefore I don't care because they're playing badly. Okay. Or they have an insane run because they're really good. Like, those are the two options that they basically have, and I'm okay with either of those options, right? I would love to see this team in form, and if they can get there, they have the potential to do one of the craziest runs in LPL playoff history from the absolute bottom of the bracket. So that's entertaining for me.
Luckily, though, we did get, I actually think, overall, the right two teams got the slots that guarantee them the double elim portion. JDG and EDG were overall the best two teams. Like, if you actually had to look at it, EDG, in terms of like being complete, probably the best like looking team in the LPL. JDG just has the insane roster, and when it hits, they are fucking sick. And then the cool thing is, like, I know LNG was competing at the well. LNG, we've talked about already. The props go to the players there, individual stars, and what we give. So to me, the right two teams got it. It's like the best part about these playoffs is we're guaranteed all those series of EDG and JDG. Like, it's going to be a fucking banger, mate. Those are the ones I want to see all the matchups of. You bring in the other teams. They're the two I want to see all the matchups with.
Yeah, exactly. And they have such insanely different styles, and like the storyline of EDG is so cool. Like JDG is basically who we expected them to be, but EDG is far better than we thought they would be given the roster moves that they had made. These are the two teams that, as of right now, we obviously want to see at MSI, but it's always very difficult because LPL playoffs are just such a different beast than the regular season, and teams don't take the regular season as seriously as we mentioned earlier. So this is the time that we see the ramp up, and potentially teams like LNG that have been really good but are fundamentally flawed in terms of the players that they have may collapse in the face of a team like Top Esports, right?
Yep.
Inevitably, there will be some pretty big upsets. Should be a really exciting playoff bracket for LPL. And even though I don't think that the top LPL teams have been at the same caliber of the top LCK teams, I reserve judgment on that until after we start seeing the good matches in LPL playoffs, because teams do level up for sure.
The other problem you have as well is this. If you haven't noticed, one of the reasons why we always praise like the macro of EDG, the coaching staff, the GMing, is because the one downside of EDG is when you look at the names on paper, you aren't like, oh my God, these guys are going to win MSI if they go. Like, it still has to be proven. I have to see these guys get over the finish line before I know they actually are what their promise suggests, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Nothing really else to say right now besides to wait. I mean, there are a bunch of good teams in there. First round may not be that inspiring, although depends on how Top Esports does, I guess. But once we start seeing like OMG, LNG, Weibo play, that's where it starts to get really fun. And then the double limb starts. The crazy thing for me is that, you know, the teams are really cutting it close to MSI this time, because MSI starts on May 2nd, I believe, and LPL playoffs probably won't, the finals probably won't even happen until like the 15th of April. And I think LEC is taking a break this coming week before they start up again. So there's no LEC
Oh, they
this
do that again,
weekend.
right?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
doing that again, which means their final weekend is the 23rd. So it's like, you know, 10 days or so before MSI starts. Now, it's obviously easier for them because they're staying in Europe, but it is a really tight timeline to prepare for MSI. Whereas LCS and LCK both end around April 9th. So they've got, you know, 3 weeks basically. Scheduling is tight on China and LEC though.
Funny thing is, I don't know about other people, but I've always thought the LPL, the reason why I also do look down on people who don't watch it at all, is you've never had to watch the whole split. I always say this, right? The LPL to me is like the NHL. I actually do love hockey at its core as a sport. I think it's a very
Yeah, it's
interesting
great.
sport, but I don't want to watch the regular season games. So all I do is it's got the best playoff format and it's got the best of sevens. So that, because the best of seven is like its own season, guys. Like, so what you do is you just tune in right before the playoffs, or you maybe watch a couple of the big games just before to hype yourself on a couple of the teams, and then you just sit down and it's like the LPL, same thing. You don't have to watch the regular split. There's going to be so many series. Like if TES were to win LPL, they'd have to play something mental, mate, like 7 fucking best of 5s or something.
Yes.
Like it's going to be an absolute slog, but as a result, like you just get into the narrative. So it's like a whole new season. If you haven't been watching, don't worry, you can tune in now. You don't need to know any of the storylines.
The minimum number, if they won all of their best of 5s, literally every single best of 5, is 6 best of 5s that they would have to win. I mean, they're going to have to win 3 best of 5s to even make it to double elimination. And then the maximum number they could play is 7. So it's a long road. It's a long road over in the LPL. Yeah. Should we do viewer questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. As usual, thank you to our Discord subscribers. That's where you get to ask the questions in the grogcoin/crew members. So if you guys are a subscriber on Discord, it is a great way to support us because we get 90% of that revenue. Thanks to our Twitch subs as well, but we get less of that revenue. But if it's free for Twitch Prime, maybe give us both.
Yeah.
But if you're using real money, it's better to do on Discord. Plus, you get to ask questions. Remove one championship winning org from league esports history. Your choice of region. Describe how the local or global landscape changes. For bonus points, they can't be a world's winning team.
I mean,
So
that
like
doesn't really
maybe
narrow
like
it
a
down
domestic championship. So it's like maybe there was a domestic league win, like a domestic league win that if a team didn't win, then it changes a lot. I mean, arguably TSM 2020 for the memes, like if they hadn't actually won that split heading into Worlds, there would be a lot less hype on them to perform, and then the 06 would look less bad in retrospect. What other teams won local leagues and then perhaps didn't do very well at Worlds? Let me think.
I mean, obviously, loads of the LPL ones.
Sure, yeah.
Every single year almost.
FPX last year was probably like pretty bad that they ended up winning, and then did pretty terribly at the World Finals.
Yeah, if I off the top of my head, I think one of the years, I think the year when they went and lost to Cloud9, so it'd be 2021 for that one. I think that was the one where one of the teams that FPX like beat. I could be talking about house on this one. I know there was one year where Rookie's team got beat by, I think, FPX in the bracket or something. Maybe it was IG still. There was one where I actually still thought Rookie was amazing. If he'd gone to Worlds, it would be awesome. And instead, the team that went just like shit the bed anyway. So I'd forget which year. I might be mixing them up on that one. So the LPL has loads where if I could go back, just because know what we know now, you'd want a different team to go and play instead, you know. So LPL is probably the most obvious one for this one. There's not that many from LEC I can even think of, mate. Mainly because, let's be real, if you ever look it up, that's why Rogue winning was so weird. There's not many orgs have ever even won LEC. There was only something like 4 or 5 ever because it's G2 and Fnatic the whole time, innit?
Yeah, that's true.
So what org would I remove? That's the problem, yeah. I don't really know. The joke obviously would have been in the past like TSM, but they've kind of removed themselves, haven't they, guys? So they're taking care of that for us.
If you had the power, would you implement region locking into LoL? Why or why not? Would the LCK be oversaturated with talent? Well, we were there, guys, in 2014, which was the highest concentration of League of Legends talent in one region in the history of League of Legends, which was champions in OGN champions in 2014. It was fucking banger. So no, again, what I would do is I would create the Super League with all of the best talent from around the world. That would be the first thing I would do. If I can't do that, I would absolutely region lock because I don't give a fuck about imports from other regions. I would rather just have Korean League, which I could follow, which would have all of the best players and all of the best. I mean, all the best, you know, for the most part, most of the best Chinese players are also Korean players, guys. Imagine if all of those players who were in China, who were Korean, were back in LCK. It would be fucking rad. Because I don't care about international competition. I only care about the best competition. So I would rather hyper infuse Korea with all of the best players than have them all spread out.
And I have also just thought, and let's be real, I'm not someone who ever flexes this idea of like, I want to have all different countries in this. I just want the best players. But I have also thought, just in terms of the flavor, I thought it was cool that all those RNG teams were the Chinese teams. They didn't have like some star carry. Like, that's what makes people like Wei Zhaohu legendary to me and just fucking gods. Like, they didn't even have some super sick Korean and they beat the Koreans. That's way cooler than being like, oh, look, we lost to like EDG. Oh, wait a minute, you mean Scout? You mean fucking Viper? They're the best Koreans. What?
Rookie.
I've always thought that's whack. Yeah, I agree with you. Whereas, like, if RNG wins it, like, I just say fair play. That is Chinese League of Legends through and through. It's not the style, but yeah. And also, if you think about it, you got what you guys are missing is this. To Monty, if all Koreans had to play in Korea, LCK would be more important than Worlds, essentially.
Yeah,
because you'd get like all those splits of it. Yeah, it'd be weird. It would actually be easily the best league in the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be great. Do you think the decline of StarCraft and StarCraft 2 was inevitable? Will RTS ever become a premier esport again? Maybe. So here's the thing. You guys have to understand why RTS was a big esport in the first place. So time for old man story time. The thing about RTS that you have to know is that team-based games were very difficult to play in the early days of esports because people didn't have reliable internet connections. So it was a miserable experience for the most part playing team games because if one person disconnected, it just ruined the entire match, right? So there was a technological reason why team-based games were less popular because it was fundamentally frustrating a lot of times to play them. Now, still, Counter-Strike was very popular back in the day. But this was, I think it was a technology issue. And then also the reason why RTS will be niche, and I do think that we can have it in the sense that team sports are also more popular than 1v1 sports, and 1v1 sports can still be successful. They can be niche like tennis or UFC. Like, they still are very profitable. They still are very successful, but they're not, you know, soccer or the NFL or the NBA, right? And they don't have to be. I think the problem is that at the end of the day, esports requires people to play the games for the most part, Counter-Strike maybe being an exception, in order to watch the esports. And RTS is a very frustrating experience to play, where most people, when they play a video game, they don't want to blame themselves for losing. And so it's easy when you queue up for a team game to be like, oh, my teammate was shit. Ignore your own problems, never do the research to get better, and just move on to the next game. RTS is a personal struggle where you must come to terms with your own failure. People don't like doing that, it turns out. And so I think the only way to revive RTS is to provide a casual team-based experience that gets people to understand the fundamentals of the units and the gameplay of the game, so that they will, even if they don't play 1v1, watch 1v1. So I think that is the conundrum. Also, having a free-to-play RTS would probably be huge, because that hasn't happened either. So I do think the decline of RTS was inevitable. It was only popular because of the place technology was in at the time. And I don't see casual gamers being forced to reckon with their own flaws. I think that's a human problem.
The problem is, I think RTS has exactly the same problem 1v1 FPS like Quake and Unreal Tournament has, which is that they're just way too hard, which unfortunately is what makes the pro scene so compelling. It's like chess or whatever. A lot of people don't actually, for casual fun, want to play a game like chess. It's too complicated. So the problem I have is this, Monty. I actually could conceive of a world where you could make an RTS that Zoomers would like to play, but I'm envisioning it as more of like an arcadey, like Clash of Clans type game, where it's a simplistic RTS. Maybe it's an RTS where there isn't big macro concepts, or you just pick units and then just put, oh, they high counted me like TFT or something. I could see like an arcadey simple version, but then how would that work for the esport? You know, for the esport, we want it to be production and mechanics and fucking harassing and extra bases. So I feel like, unfortunately, the ship, it's the same thing for Quake, unfortunately, in 1v1. The ship's just sort of sailed on that sort of extremely hardcore esports game. Remember, in the modern day, Counter-Strike is considered hardcore. Dota is considered hardcore. These were the casual games in the heyday of Quake and like Starcraft, if you don't know. These were the games you played for fun to cool down from the fact you just laddered like 10 games in a row in Quake and you have to be like on the whole time and you get your ass kicked by someone. Then for fun, you go, fuck it, let's just load up like Dota and play a silly little I'm having a team fight. That's the whole point. So unfortunately, I feel like it's a casual era.
Dota was the game that I played with my friends who weren't hardcore about laddering War 3 like I was.
Yeah.
It was the for fun game.
And also, I'll give you a random piece of a trivia that people don't understand. It's also because gaming now has a real social element. It's just it's on the internet, which is in its own way is antisocial. But you get what I mean. Back in the day, it was more like you were trying to play competitively. So you play with people around your rank. You practice people around your rank in 1v1 games. Or in even in Counter-Strike, you get in a scrim and you're trying to get better. In these games, you're supposed to play for fun with your friends. I remember someone years ago describing what it was like when he tried to get his friend into StarCraft 2, where he wasn't just playing StarCraft 2, but he was like watching GSL. And he said, after my friend watched a few like big finals with me, he was like, maybe I'll give it a go. And he was like, right, should we play on Saturday? And he was like, oh, there'd be no point. And go, what do you mean? And he go, I'm just too good for you. Like, essentially, I would have to like try not to win for you to have a chance. And he goes, okay, well then like, can I like play on the ladder? And if I get good, I'll get matched with you. And he's like, you won't be at my rank. It'll take you like years to get there. And the whole point is like, the joke is he wants his friend to play, but he just realizes like, the nature of how we play these games isn't social. It's a 1v1 hardcore thing. That's why people had all the like ladder anxiety and all that shit in those games at the end. So I feel like that era of gamer has moved on too. People now just want to have a fun time. In my opinion, it's why people bitch about League of Legends so much. It's not that the game's terribly designed. It's that there's just too many mechanics in it where it feels like you're not having fun. It feels like you're trapped. Feels like it's a grind. That is what playing games like RTS is, by the way. Like if you play RTS, you can do the most perfect, like safe opening, and then they get that tiny timing off where they do some all in, and it's just ruined, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? Like it's so infuriating. Like you don't. It's not like la 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 in League of Legends, dude. You go down in 2 kills in lane, you come back in the game. You know,
the one Dark Templar gets into your SCV line, or the one Reaver gets dropped there, and then like the most perfect Scarab shoots out of all time, and like the RNG of the Scarab just like destroys 8 SCVs. You're like, fuck.
Or even what happened literally to my mate Naniwa, which is why, if you remember, he like quit gaming at the time, which is when he was at the IEM and he did that fucking like proxy, and then Paul instantly scouted it. It's like, well, that's the end of that. I'm like, prepared all these weeks. I've thought about what I was going to do. I gave, I meta theory crafted. I put the thing, he scouted straight with. That's over then. So that doesn't exist in League. You can't lose League in 5 minutes. Yeah. No, that's maybe like 2 minutes for that. Like, like fucking hell. That's not even possible, guys.
Yeah. Anyway, I love RTS. I would personally, I would love nothing more than for a big RTS game. Like, I am truly rooting for, Immortal Gates of Pyre or Stormgate or these games to be successful, at least at a level that's sustainable, because I just fucking love it. And we've lost a lot from esports by not having a big 1v1 game. We've lost
mate, I'll tell you one thing I would already love as well. If there was a really good RTS game, I guarantee you LS would be all over it, guys. He would fucking love that shit. And you'd see a different side of him you haven't seen if you don't know him from other games. You've only seen him in League, in Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, maybe a bit of Hearthstone if you were old school. Like, he would fucking love to embrace like a big RTS game. It's all about his thinking of the game. It would be mega interesting.
In the same way that, with the new version of CS, we're going to see all those Valorant influencers kind of returning to their roots. So many of us in esports came from RTS and are itching to go back. I mean, Doa came from RTS. Valdez on the cast, like, he started in League, but he did StarCraft for many years.
I remember when I was over there,
Yeah, Valdez. Wolf, obviously, huge RTS background, like OG RTS people. So many of us who are in our 30s started with RTS games, either casting or playing them very heavily, that, like, there's a lot of goodwill for RTS, and maybe
it could also have the most insane talent when you say it like that, Monty. Think about that. When you make a game like Valorant, it has to like get new talent. This RTS game could just have all the best RTS talent of all time.
Yeah, and look, there's so many people who want to do this, who come from this space, that I am hopeful that if there is a good RTS game, maybe, just maybe, enough of us can like push people in that direction if we all are doing it at the same time. All right, question. My nephew, to whom I play the father role, has reached his teenage rebel phase. Whenever I try to influence his growth, I get grumpy noises back. In a mad twist of face, he still enjoys summoning insight and values your opinions. Based on the book, literature, and media he is trying to read, I deducted that it's you folks. That's funny. Since I can't directly influence him until his rebel phase is over, can I ask you guys which books developed your moral compass as a teen/young adult, or which books you think would be a great influence on young people? That's a very interesting question. So for me, I really got into mythology. And so, the Iliad in particular, and to a lesser degree, the Odyssey. So the works of Homer, Greek mythology, Norse mythology.
I don't feel like he's going to read that, though. Even though that is your influence, I don't know if he's going to read that.
I can
it's
only
be a bit of a
talk
slog, Monty, isn't it? Isn't it going to be a bit? If he's like, it sounds like he's a young guy, like a teenager or something.
I read the Iliad when I was 12. So that's just who I am.
This is what happened. Exactly. So
this is what happened when
basically take Monty's face whenever he's doing these shows. I was like, discuss to us, yes, and go the Iliad, not even once. That's the campaign I want to start, kids. If you did just slip Monty a few Goosebumps novels, it'd be a totally different show. It'd be like fucking The Dive right now. That's by the way, that's so condescending. That's what I actually implied. It's all that favorite. But you know what? I'm sticking with it.
I did read the Goosebumps book, but I was
when
like
you were 3.
7.
I knew it was coming. There you go. I knew it was coming.
Let me put it this way. I probably read Goosebumps when I was like 7. By the time I was 9, I was reading like Jurassic Park and The Hunt for Red October. By the time I was 12, I was reading the Iliad. So that's the Monty reading time.
Speaking of which, I'll tell you, so considering if you do any mainstream stuff, people always like never reference you. Michael Crichton books aren't bad, mate. Like Jurassic Park's good. I read Congo. A bunch of those are pretty good. He's actually pretty good. You see, like he knows his craft. Yeah, look, they are airport books, but he knows his craft, mate. He tells a good story. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely was influenced by a lot of Michael Crichton books growing up. I read a lot because they're really entertaining, right?
Yeah, they make it compelling.
Yeah, so I think probably, I love Jurassic Park, obviously. Very different from the movie if you haven't read it. Very, very different. It's better. And then it actually has more of the characters that live and die are like entirely different, and I think it has more of a profound impact, the book. I also really like Timeline, the book about the traveling
goes to the Middle Ages,
the medieval, the Middle Ages. The movie is fucking horrible, but the book's pretty fun.
All right. What books
what else?
would we recommend for this guy?
I mean, obviously, like, look, a lot of these books are going to be pieces of classic literature. What else was I reading in my teens? Late teens, probably like Moby Dick was huge for me. I mean, I came up with my name, MonteCristo, when I was a teenager. So I was reading Dumas, like The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. Yeah, these are all books that were very important to me.
I'll give you a few. I'll just give ones where essentially, as this guy's implying, you want to like incept an idea into the person reading it while they experience the characters and the dynamics, but you don't want to just overtly make it seem like this book is what you're going to think. So essentially, the secret here, this is why, even though I agree it's your influence, I just don't believe that kid's going to read the Iliad. Or if he does, he's going to literally quit like 4 pages in. He's going to go, wait a minute, this isn't just like a quote of a poem. It's all like, holy shit, like he's going to quit immediately. Like there's no way. So he's not going to read something like, and then great Ionian Jove doth go. No, he's just going to quit instantly, mate. He's not going to. So you have to have a book here where he also could just literally get like hooked as soon as he starts reading and enjoy the story. And then the story is going to like draw him through all the lessons. So I'll give you a few classics. I would say I would give him the first Dune.
Oh yeah,
just a great book about coming of age.
Yep.
You know, what does it mean to be a man? How do you protect people? What does power mean?
I would say Neuromancer by William Gibson is like
a classic one.
Very good one.
I would say Ender's Game. It's about like
Ender's
leadership.
Game is fabulous for young people.
It's also very, very well written for a teenager. I think they'll be able to get in straight away. And then if you want, I'll throw in a graphic novel. I think the graphic novel I would say is I would do something like V for Vendetta. It's about ideas like when should we use violence? Like what is like too far? What's society supposed to be? Like what is the individual? What is like state authority and stuff? But it's not too heavy-handed. Like it has elements of nuance and grey area like all Alan Moore. So the key thing about this is I think you want to present them with things where characters who themselves maybe like are going through growth, like a lot of protagonists are presented with like big situations where they have to learn from their experiences or make the wrong. That's what, when you do that, I think those are the lessons you put in people's minds.
Yeah, those are all, I think, very good recommendations. Watchmen also is probably a good one.
I just wouldn't start with that. It's a bit dark. You know what I mean? You don't want him to go straight to nihilism. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing, Monty. It's all nothing.
Yeah, I think those are good recommendations. Favorite films of the 2010s. Oh my God.
This is easy because I'm pretty sure I actually did an episode of one of my AMAs. So I'm going to quickly like look through the files where I did like a bunch of the 2010s.
Released when? Come on, man.
Well, here's the thing. If you told me movies, I could tell you roughly if they're out there. Or I can look it up for you if you want. Like what's coming to mind immediately?
Oh God. I'm a huge Ari Aster fan. So I'm looking forward to his new movie, Beau is Afraid. I really liked Hereditary. Oh boy. This is something Thorin disagrees with, but I love Mad Max Fury Road. Fucking love that movie. I
mean, I can tell you some, like, for example, Monty likes loads of Westerns. So he liked like Slow West, the one with Fassbender.
Yeah, Slow West was
probably likes the remake of like 316 to Yuma or whatever the fuck that one, Yuma Express.
That one, I think that was before that though, right?
No, because we saw it together, I'm pretty sure, man. That'll be like, what, 2012 or 2013 or something? What is that?
2007 or 310 to Yuma. Yeah, the remake was 2007. I can think a lot more from 2000 to 2010.
Probably. What did you think of the remake of True Grit?
It was pretty good.
Do you like that? That'll be in there, won't it? Wouldn't that be out? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it was a pretty good one.
That's 2010, in fact. There you go.
Cynic Doge New York. I'm thinking about Charlie Kaufman movies that I enjoyed. Cynic Doge New York was 2008.
What about, let me think. Oh, fuck, what was it? I was going to say one there. What was it in 2010? There was some movie I was just thinking of that you might like. Well, what about Interstellar? Did you like it? That was 2010.
Yeah, it was all right. It was pretty good. I enjoyed that one. Honestly, in the last 10 years, I've just watched so much more TV shows than I have movies. That's
since we've talked about it in the past, I know you don't. Days of Future Past, the X-Men one that was 2014.
Oh, I fucking love X-Men Days of Future Past.
There's a good one to watch.
I think that's the best superhero movie of all time.
Even if you haven't watched any other superheroes, you can just watch it. It's just a good movie, mate.
It's really good. What other A24 films have I really enjoyed? Because A24, I really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once, although that was not the 2010s either, so that's been more recent. I love A24 in general. So let me look at the ones that they've released prior to 2020. because most of their other stuff has been. Hold on, let me look at their list. Hereditary is 2018, I think. That one was really good. The Lobster was really good from them.
Oh, the Colin Farrell one. That's like
Yeah.
an existential movie. If people
That's
don't know.
really good. That one's really
With
fun.
like a strange sort of like dystopian theme to
Yeah.
it, without spoiling anything.
Yeah, the framing is really good on that one. A24 has been fucking slaying it. Midsummer, I guess, was 2019, which is another Ari Aster one.
Wasn't that a bit gimmicky for you, though? I think you said you weren't as big a fan.
I didn't like it as much as I liked Hereditary, but I still thought it was very good.
Okay.
Ex Machina would be another one. Oh, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. That one's fucked up. Yeah. Yeah, those are some. I don't know. I would have to actually like go back and look, guys. So I'm sorry. That was a little out of nowhere. This is something that pull out on the top of my heads.
What's sad is I can't find my thing. I definitely did an episode where someone asked me exactly this question. I'm pretty sure. I think they asked me in the 2000s what the best movies were. So, like, sadly, I can't actually find that list. But I'll try just quickly finding a few of what I would pick. I'm just going to go through some of the years. Interstellar was 2010. That was pretty good. Look, it was one of the more flawed ones, but I thought it was good in general.
I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, the problem I have with that one is I just don't know if I would watch it again. I thought it was very good the first time I watched it. Look, I'll always say I'm not a fan of Marvel movies, but I did think Infinity War was very good. I think if you just watch Infinity War at all, it's just a good standalone movie. Yeah, like they definitely went for it. It was very ambitious. Let me think. There's so many movies that are like 1 or 2 years before when I keep looking at them.
I know, that's what I think. Unfortunately, I think the previous decade was kind of like better in a way.
Even though it's flawed, like Dark Knight Rises, it is still a good movie at times. It definitely has some very like some elements that are unforgettable. Quite bold movie, I would say.
Yeah. My problem with those Nolan Batman movies is like you only remember the good parts and you just like delete all the really shitty parts from your brain. Because there are a lot of bad parts.
Can't lie though, this decade wasn't that great. Like the 2000s is way better than this, and then all the decades before just get better and better and better and better, don't they?
Yeah, like a lot of the good Charlie Kaufman movies were 2000 to 2010, and there were better Quentin Tarantino movies during that period too. Oh, Parasite was great. That was 2019.
I've got a couple, right? I've obviously said in the past I like the movie Mandy. Look, I will say, look up what type of movie it is before you watch it, because there's some people will not be able to handle that movie. It's just super. I would just say it's one of the most intense movies you can ever watch. Like that director, if you don't know, is like a guy who's very much about like surrealistic, like all out there, like imaginative stuff. If you just want some of the even big ones that were like Hollywood movies, I thought Nightcrawler was a good movie, and so
that was good.
Great acting performance by Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah, that's very interesting sort of questions it asks about media and kind of like essentially like ambulance chase culture, if people know what that is. I think that was a pretty good movie.
The other ones I would say are The Master, which was the one that was basically, I mean, they couldn't say it was Scientology.
Yeah.
It was Scientology, but
it was.
It was, but they couldn't say it because they didn't want to get sued.
Yeah.
But that one was really good. Also, I really liked Get Out. I thought that was good.
It was all right. Premise wasn't bad.
Yeah, premise was cool.
The problem I had with that was I sort of guessed what it was like halfway through, but whatever.
Yep. So let's keep going. If you could remove a world champion title from one player and give it to another, who would you remove it from, and who would you give it to, and why? Well, I'd give one to fucking Score. Who would I remove it from? I don't know. There's so many players. Gimgoon,
Baolan,
Baolan.
You know,
yeah. If I could take it from Pyosha, I can give it to Score. That'd be fun.
Here's the thing. This is where me being a hater actually helps Monty, because if I take a title away from Wolf, he still has a title. He still gets to be a world champion. I'm only taking one Wolf, and I'm just going to give it to Flame. No reason why, by the way. Just like him.
Can I take it from Looper and give it to Smeb?
There you go.
Any thoughts on doing one-time event-style shows, some kind of trivia with Thorin the Historian, or a Counter-Strike 2 launch party? Yeah, I mean, we should do more of those. We're just kind of caught in the grind of the regular season right now and trying to work on the business side of things, but sure, we'd love to do some of that. Okay, so hear me out.
I've got one more movie I should have referenced from the 2010s. If you've ever watched In Bruges, the guy who did that, the director, did that movie, Seven Psychopaths. And it sounds, if you look at it, it even looks like it's a horror movie. It isn't. It's actually just a really quirky comedy with brilliant actors. It's got mega actors. It's got Christopher Walken, Colin Farrell, Woody Harrelson. Oh, it's just a really fun, quirky movie. By the way, if you enjoy freeze pipe products, watch it while you are under the influence, as they say.
Oh, I forgot a couple. So one of them was Arrival. I really enjoyed Arrival.
Conceptually mega, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed Birdman as well. I thought that
pretty
was
good.
I really like.
As long as he can handle dream logic, it's a good movie. If you try, if you want it to make sense like a real, maybe it won't. You
know. So there's some other ones. Well, I probably forgot some, but we didn't do a thorough dive there. Okay, so hear me out. Solution for fixing Team Heretics. You rebuild some around Jankos and Jack Spectra. Don't know about that Jack Spectra one. You bring in the Korean challengers top laner instead of Evi, like Vitality did with Photon. You get VTO for mid lane. I think Jankos jungle style match well with his lane-centric style. You get Targamas. I don't know if Targamas. I think Targamas might be. He might have some personality issues, or another roaming support style to support the top side of the map. What are your thoughts on how Heretics can fix their roster? I mean, it doesn't sound bad in theory, but unfortunately, Targamas and VTO seem kind of mental boomed at the moment. The Korean challengers, you know, getting Chasey and Photon has worked quite well for these European teams, so I wouldn't poo-poo that.
I do think though, like those are like exceptions to the rule. You're not just going to get those players every time. You're just pulling a challenger guy out of Korea, and also there's the world as well where the guy just has a terrible integration culture fit or language-wise or something. He might just be a good player, but you never know the English level. By the way, that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that some of these players get into the LEC and you look up like, oh, did they come from Korea? All right, they're already playing in the RL. They've kind of proven that they can work in a team environment. Like, I think it's a big gamble still to take players just randomly out of Korea and fucking them in a Western team, you know. I'd rather just take a player that's around now. Like, aren't there good players I can just take now and put in the team? Why do I have to put all these Koreans? The fuck?
Yeah, I think Peter.
Can't just get like self-made or something. Well, I guess I have Yankees in this team. You know, real players. Jizuki, bring him back. There you go. Put Jizuki with Yankos. There you go.
Yeah, and Bwitbo on top. That'd be fun.
That'd be a back team.
You could actually probably develop a really interesting like split push team with Jizuke and Bwitbo.
For sure.
Together. That sounds very entertaining, actually. How would you build a team around the Shy? Budget is no issue, and you're even more charismatic than Perks. I hate the Shy, man. I fucking hate this guy. He had like one good year. He fucking runs it in lane a lot of the time. He's so inconsistent. I don't think you can build a team around the Shy.
The problem with it is I don't really know how you do it, because on the one hand, I don't know, am I supposed to build the rest of the team to be so sturdy he can hit and sort of win for, or should I just go IG and just build it so they all just do that, and then if it works,
and you hope that they all just
exactly.
You know, they max
roll the dice.
They max roll at exactly the same time.
You just have to roll a 20, basically. If you roll the basically, the problem with the Shy...
I'm still so salty about that, because they all max rolled against KT that one year. Fuck that.
Here's the problem with the Shy, Monty. This is the analogy, and if you get this analogy, you'll know what the problem with the Shy is. The Shy is someone who, because of the raw talent he has, and even if people know in the past, he did seem like once upon a time he was a grinder and a guy who like put a lot of hours in the League of Legends and had like a drive to be very, very good. To me, he's someone who in life, every time he plays blackjack, he gets 16, but he hits every time. He hits every time, no matter what he's against. Now, if you get that analogy, you know exactly what the problem with the Shy is. Like, the problem is it's hard to build a team around him. I think it's probably it looks like the most uncoachable player of all time, if I had to guess. That's a pure speculation.
How big of an upgrade in role would it be for 100 Thieves to start Nuke Duck and Unforgiven next split? Please give your answers in hoodie size as the only language Nate Shot understands. Probably a medium upgrade. I think a medium hoodie sized upgrade. I don't think they'll do it though, because it's more important for them to have Double Lift and Bjergsen for advertising than it is for them to win more games.
The problem is
that's my theory.
I've just tried that too many times and it doesn't work. Basically, the reason why you think Nukeduck would be awesome is because he's a guy who understands like wave manipulation and then he could play like different stuff. That's never happened. Everyone said that when they've gone to LCS. Oh, I'm gonna smurf on him. I'm gonna split, but it just doesn't work. So unfortunately, like, I think he might actually be better than Bjergsen. I don't know. Bjergsen's very up and down and seems to have lost a lot of confidence in who he is as identity. But I doubt it would make fundamental difference like what he said. You wouldn't suddenly win the LCS. I doubt it'd be that much of a difference. So, as he says, why would you give up the PR side, which is the one thing you really signed him for, at a minimum?
Right. I understand why Bro will probably never make it to Bangers Only or probably and be shown on here, but can having a team like them be good for the league? A bottom feeder who's legitimately popular? Yeah, of course. Maybe something along the lines of Cubs pre-World Series. Yeah, I think like, or the Cowboys for the last 30 years, you know, maybe not bottom feeders, the Cowboys, but yeah, of course. Like, I think it's good that teams are excited about watching a bottom team. And I think that's part of what the league and the commentators of the league should be doing is finding identities for these teams, right? Back when I was casting in Korea, like, I would hype up Jin Air and talk about their style and be excited about watching them, even though they weren't the best team in the league. It's up to the league to position the teams properly and the teams to position themselves properly at the same time. And it's just really badly done in esports most of the time. With the next James Bond actor having yet to be announced, who at LFN would be the most suited for the role? I don't know. I don't know if we have anybody who would be very well suited for the role.
I don't think we've got the problem is we're not really that sort of we're not about being slick and all that shit, are we? So don't really know if
we can say who in esports would be best suited to that role. That might be a more interesting conversation.
Who would you pick for that? Who's even in the conversation?
Well, they have to be British, right? I think that's like the Britishness is like a core aspect of James Bond. So I would say with his interest in like the finer things in life and watches, I would say James Bardolph. He's a very classy individual. I could see that.
I mean, the joke is you're closer to how they're actually casting James Bond right now anyway, I guess. So you sort of parallel thought you went out. The problem is, if it's going to be someone British, you've already ruined it because most of the people in esports aren't like the classy British gentleman who has like the sophistication, which is what you'd want classically from James Bond. We don't really have those to some degree. Like I'm trying to think because even a lot of the people, like, here's what's funny. People won't get this analogy, but back in the day, before he took the turn he has the last few years, Stemler's whole style in Counter-Strike was actually to try and have like fine suits and to look suave and to be sophisticated and to bring like a different type of a show. So he at least had like the vibe at one point in time.
Yeah. What book should more people read?
The joke would just be the Bible, wouldn't it? But like, whatever. Although in an inadvertent way it is, because all I'll say is this: too many people don't know. Like, I think people really think the Bible just is like those things in Leviticus where it's like, and then Jedediah begat Nagura and Nagura. It's not. Those are only the weird ones, and you can skip past them. Like the point is, you go and you read like Psalms or something. And by the way, don't even do that. Get like a book that's like collected, you know, the best of or the most poetic parts. Get some of that's like the cool parts, because essentially what you would find, unironically, if you read some of it, is how much of everything else in Western culture was influenced by it. You'll probably be shocked. It's a bit like Shakespeare. You know, the people who aren't aware, Monty, that like 75% of the famous sayings that exist in the Anglosphere are just from Shakespeare. They're not even from like anything else. They're just from Shakespeare.
The two answers are definitely the Bible and Shakespeare.
They're the Rosetta Stone of the Anglosphere, basically.
You cannot understand Western history or culture without understanding those two things. So if you don't know the references, if you don't know the stories, it is very difficult for you to read any other book because every other author will refer to those stories, period, and those quotes. So, I mean, it's like obviously everything relates back to the Bible. Like, can you read Milton without having read the Bible? Can you read Dante without having read the Bible? Even modern literature, it's very, very difficult to understand anything that's going on without those touch points. And Shakespeare, especially, like obviously anything past 1600, you're going to have a really rough time without a basic fundamental understanding of Shakespeare. And you don't have to know all of Shakespeare. Like, You don't need to know all the histories or all the comedies, but like you do need to understand Hamlet, you know, Macbeth, these kind of King Lear. Like you must understand these. Do you guys think the LEC studios will ever leave that bureaucratic hellscape called Germany and relocate to a better location? Some of the biggest mistakes in Riot's esports history were locating LCS in Los Angeles and locating LEC in Berlin. Those were both terrible decisions because they affect the teams very seriously, and the kind of cost of living puts a huge burden on the team. Obviously, trying to film in Los Angeles. The thing is, most movies are not even made in Los Angeles anymore because it's too expensive. Marvel's made in fucking Atlanta, guys. You know, movies are made in New Mexico. Movies are made in Georgia. Movies are made in Toronto. They're not even made in LA for the most part. It is so expensive to do anything in these locations. The reason why LCS was plopped down here is because Riot is here. The reason Riot is here is because the founders of Riot wanted to live in Los Angeles. It's not a reasonable choice, right?
I also think as well, by the way, even though, look, it's not like I was a fan of people being a Riot caster, but I don't know how you're supposed to live and thrive in LA without being an actual full-time employee of Riot. Like the idea you're a freelance caster working on the LCS, that just sounds like nonsense. That's the worst part of esports, where what you're doing basically is saying, like the bottom of Hollywood, like, want to make it, kid? Then you're going to like carry all the costs. Like, mate, this is supposed to be, in theory, you're supposed to be at the peak of North American esports if you work on LCS. It should be a prestigious job that like people work up to and want to achieve that goal. But like I'm saying, you're going to be in such a terrible scenario if you work for them and you ever get like a serious illness or something. It's just going to wipe you out. Like that, I can't fuck with that. As you say, you could have it somewhere else. People could just be at home and be doing this stuff if they had the right green screen set up and stuff. You know, I don't know, mate. I don't feel it. It's not the time to be in LA, is it?
No, or the time to be in Germany. I mean, it's just the teams hate it too because the payroll taxes, like all the taxes you pay in California, like just objectively straight up, LCS would be better in Las Vegas because it's the cost of living is lower, the taxation is lower, cost of labor is significantly lower. It's close enough to LA. It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, 1 hour flight. There's no reason that anything has to be located in esports in Los Angeles anymore. It is foolish. It is foolish. Have either of you read any Kurt Vonnegut novels? I've read Slaughterhouse-5 a long time ago, but I don't think I've read anything else. It was good, I guess. Not my favorite. With 100 Thieves losing this weekend, is this a sign that the level of the LCS has improved or that teams have invested into technology that protects players from being mind controlled by Bjergsen and DL and forced to int? The parity of the league was higher this split, but also it's Bjergsen and Doublelift are just not as good as they used to be. Like Bjergsen used to be legitimately extremely dominant, but he's not that guy anymore. So we're not seeing the best iterations of those. And also, like, there are just better teams at this point in time.
Am I the only one who doesn't get that that's the narrative? The narrative is like, it's a big shock that 100 Thieves didn't work out. I never thought this team was ever going to be good. Look at the fucking roster. Like, not only was Bjergsen and Doublelift nowhere near what people thought they would be and hoped they would be, the other players also were at times mad sus, and some of them never recovered, quite frankly, in my opinion. Like, they were just whatever. So I just didn't think it was I thought it was a poorly constructed roster, mate.
Yep. If Mad Lions go to MSI as the second seed from Europe, will they be the fourth best Western team in attendance? Ooh.
I mean, it's looking pretty unlikely that's going to happen right now. Like,
yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm not even, that's a hell of a hypothetical. So
probably if they manage to make it that far, just because we would have to, assuming that it's EG, Cloud9, assuming Golden Guardians doesn't make it, is all I'm saying. We would, based on recent inconsistency, we'd have to go with Mad Lions.
I think their bot lane would get murdered internationally, mate.
Razork seems to be having a resurgence over at Fnatic, yet the credit seems to primarily go to Reckless and Oscarinen. Do you think this is a playstyle issue or just the same old fan bias? I mean, Razork has been a streaky player. Remember in summer playoffs last year where he just mega popped off? He has these times where he is really good individually. I don't know if I would say it's a resurgence. I will say temporarily, because I've seen this before with Razork on this roster. So I do think he deserves credit, however. Does the support role need more mechanically intensive champs? Would Keria shine brighter with higher ceiling champs? I think that every role in League of Legends, I like that there's difference and variance, and that generally the support role is less mechanically intensive as a whole, because I think it allows different kinds of players to be in that position and to focus on vision and shot calling and roaming the map. So no, I think it's fine that, the real question is, should Keria be a support player? That's the question you're asking, I think. What are your all-time favorite theme songs / music tracks on traditional sports broadcasts?
Oh, there's a very famous one, which is the NBA on NBC, which is like the classic early 2000s, 90s basketball one. If you ever hear it, you'll know it instantly. It's like just hearing that like evokes like the warm, nostalgic memories of falling in love with the NBA.
I think it has to be the Carrie Underwood Sunday night NFL songs for Sunday Night Football. It's cheesy as fuck, but it's just so American, the pop country, and the way they like change the song every week to reflect the teams. Like they just change little pieces of it. It's iconic. It's iconic. And I like that. Gen.G always seems to develop into a strong macro team with good cohesion, but have historically placed second or third in LCK playoffs. Taking player style into account, are there any players from other teams you think could be inserted into the current Gen.G roster to elevate them to a higher level? I mean, Keen would be a very interesting one. Keen or Zeus into the Gen.G roster. I think it would give them more weapons to play with. I think a lot of like Viper would be an interesting one in the bottom lane. They've shown that a lot of these AD carries are more or less plug and play for them, and that they are going to play through bot lane no matter what.
The problem I have with the question is I actually just reject the premise, because what you're doing is taking the org, which had 0 of the players that play now, and you're actually taking the BDD ruler era of Gen.G, which was a lot of coming to the set finals, coming second, doing the Rocks Tigers, you win the regular split, but then you come second in the finals to T1 or whoever. But you're doing that with totally different players. Like, I don't see what the connection is. Like, this Gen.G core hasn't had that problem. What are you on about? Like, they were all right in spring. They won the summer mega. They're actually now in position again, maybe stylistically, to do well. Sure, yeah, people like Peanut have choked a bit. Chovy hasn't won many titles. There's that. But that's like a different set of people and problems. That's not really the problems that BDD are them. It's kind of a different set of issues of not showing up in big games or whatever. So I don't worry about that personally. I don't think you necessarily need to. Like, the only thing you do, like Monty says, is replace maybe the ADC. That's about it. And the top lane are the only two that you change. The rest are all great. They look great. And they've played together really well. I'm not worried at all about Gen.G, especially in a world where there's 2 MSI slots. Great. They can even be second now and get better in summer. Who knows?
Will there ever be another world champ lineup without any Koreans on the roster? Seems unlikely, because most of the top Chinese teams are building around Korean stars. So it seems very unlikely that would occur. But EDG, maybe. I mean, EDG is doing super well right now, right? Maybe they won't win the world championship, but they at least are a threat and looking like a top team.
The problem you have basically is that it was top esports all those years you had to be hoping for if you wanted it to happen. Because top esports was the one with Knight, who actually maybe could have been like the MVP of the tournament, and they had all the Chinese players. So since he now plays with Ruler, no, unfortunately. That's just the answer. And then obviously the joke is Scout and Tarzan are both fucking Korean, aren't they? So there's not really a team out there, guys. Like, I don't believe EDG is going to win Worlds. It's not going to happen. Come on.
Monty always talks about liking RTS games. Does he follow us play any current RTS games like Age of Empires 4? I have been helping out with the Immortals, helping out a little bit with the Immortal Gates of Pyre guys that definitely take a more Brood War approach to RTS. So I've done some casting for them with Doa and like some feedback for them. But yeah, I'm just waiting for a new RTS game to come out. So I think probably we're going to call it there. There are a few more questions left. You guys can ask them again next episode if you guys are curious. But we've done about 45 minutes of questions at this point in time. So I think we gotta call it. Got some other stuff to do later today from the business side of LFN. So thanks a lot. We'll be talking more playoffs from around the world next week on the show. Thanks for Ox for coming on. Sorry, he got a little bit felt under the weather and couldn't continue, but enjoyable to have him while he was here. We'll see if we get into guests for next week. See you then.